Welcome. Good evening. It's 7 o'clock. Time and place set for the July 2023 meeting of the Royal Oak Planning Commission. Welcome. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and I'll call the roll, starting with Ms. Beakey.
Good evening, Ann Beakey.
Clyde Esbury.
Charlene Douglas, City Commissioner.
Tim Quigg, Director of Community Development.
Nick Gruchowski, Interim City Attorney.
Woody Gantina.
Jim Ellison.
Mike Fournier, Mayor.
Joseph Murphy, Director of Planning.
And I'm Gary Casado, the chairperson. First thing we'll do, does anybody have anything to add to the agenda? Sometimes this happens. Anything tonight? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the first order of business. That is approval of the meeting minutes for June 13th, 2023. Did the commissioners have a chance to read these over? Do they have any comments, questions, edits, corrections, or a motion?
I move approval.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Gantina. Motions to approve the meetings presented in our packet. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Meeting minutes are approved. All right. Next item on the agenda is public comment on non-agenda items. If you have a issue that you'd like to address to the Planning Commission on a non-agenda item, then I invite you to come up. I see a couple hands here.
Thank you. Charles Sanchina, former Royal Oak City Commissioner, City Attorney for 10 years, former Assistant Oakland County Prosecutor, Special Assistant U.S. Attorney, and Special Assistant Attorney General in the past. I'm here because of a case of assault, harassment, disruption of a public meeting. I put my qualifications and experience out here because I'm not a fool. I know when I'm being lied to, and I know when there's a cover-up, and that's what's happening here. This Planning Commission has some responsibility for an incident that happened at the charrettes that happened in May. There was some bizarre appointment process where Jim Razor ended up being appointed to be some type of special envoy to assist the consultants who were running these meetings. I don't know what his special qualifications were, but he did announce that he was appointed or had been appointed by the mayor to be on that special assignment. The meeting was about the downtown. It lasted for about an hour. There was no incidents at all up to that point in time. People were just listening to the consultant, asking a few questions along the way. When the consultant indicated, the meeting's about to end, we'll have about 10 more minutes, people raised their hands. Razor interrupted, like he does in the past, and made outrageous statements about a newspaper article I was quoted in the past. The article was about the mayor taking money from people who he had approved no-bid contracts for, and the money was in his campaign fund. And he was very distressed that I actually had a campaign political sign on my lawn. People in the audience were upset. They were signaling to Razor to shut up, sit down. He didn't. The only people in the crowd that didn't seem surprised or shocked by his actions were those with the little political clique that were sitting around him. That was Char Douglas, Colo, and a couple other people that I can't identify. But the thing escalated with Razor getting up, approaching me. I had to get out of my seat and get out of there, go around the table, ended up going out the door. The meeting ended in total chaos. People didn't get to have their questions answered. 6 police reports were filed. The detective investigated, referred the case to the city attorney, Mr. Gruchowski, who I spoke to yesterday. The video of the meeting was tampered with or destroyed or altered, kind of like the incident at the Elks Club where the mayor and Clyde Esbury assaulted Greg Stano and an altered video appeared a couple weeks later. But surprisingly, Gruchowski told me that he had no real duty or responsibility to the victims, the dozen of people who were denied their meeting. His responsibility was only to the mayor and city commission. It appears that we're now in a lawless situation where anyone who's a friend of the mayor or an elected official has some form of immunity and can do whatever they want in the city commit whatever offense and not have any ordinance violations written against them. That's outrageous. There's no conflict of interest here. None of the elected officials are a defendant. It's a friend of the mayor, a spokesperson of the mayor, someone who's spoken on his behalf in the past and was speaking on his behalf at the charrette. A friend of the mayor does not justify a conflict of interest, and these charges should be issued, and the victims should have an opportunity to be protected. And there's only a few people here. There'd be a lot more people if they weren't afraid to come.
We have a rule of 3 minutes. Thank you. Next.
Good evening. My name is James Seaman. I am an architect, and as you are aware, my seal was fraudulently used for the Basha Diagnostics site plan submission that this commission approved. I've prepared a statement that I'd like to read. It's only going to take a minute. I hope you take it seriously. I attended last month's meeting with my attorney, and I'm here today because I'm profoundly disappointed with the commission's response to this situation, your policies for vetting submissions, and your understanding of the significance of an architect's seal. At the end of last month's meeting, during your discussion about this issue, it was stated that, and I quote, "This is simply a dispute between two parties which they need to resolve." Let me clarify, this is not a dispute. My seal was used fraudulently and without my consent or knowledge. I discovered this purely by happenstance by the civil engineer whose seal was also used fraudulently. So I'm doing you a favor by bringing this to your attention. If your stance is that it is not your responsibility to vet the integrity of a seal, then you're basically saying it's okay for people to submit drawings to Royal Oak with fraudulent seals because the architect most likely won't find out about it, and if they do, then there's nothing you will do about it anyway. So why even bother requiring a seal? In my experience, submitting drawings to other municipalities involves a robust vetting process that verifies the seal's integrity. They demand for further information and confirm that I, as the architect, am indeed the one who sealed the drawings. However, during the May 11th meeting, this commission permitted the owner to present the plan and respond to highly technical questions by you, and there was no verification by this panel or planning staff whether the two gentlemen presenting were architects or whether they were the ones who had sealed the drawings. Finally, I was particularly disturbed during your discussion when it was suggested that if the owner would simply hire me to seal their drawings, it would resolve this matter. Indeed, and perhaps prodded by this comment, on the very next day, the owner's attorney contacted my attorney with the same request. Please understand, an architect is not akin to a notary public. Our seal carries weight and responsibility. As architects, we bear the burden of ensuring public health, safety, and welfare. When we affix our seal to a drawing, it implies we have diligently ensured the design meets all code requirements and it's safe for public use. I am pursuing all legal options at my own expense because it's the right thing to do. I have also contacted and working with the police since this is identity theft, the Michigan Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, and the Michigan chapter of the American Institute of Architects. My request is for this commission to rescind the Basha site plan submission and establish more efficient procedures to prevent such incidents from happening again. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Others who would like to speak on non-agenda items? I see a hand.
Bill Harrison, Royal Oak. I'd like to speak at this time about the master plan process. The charrettes limited public participation by being in the daytime rather than at night or on weekends when most people are not working. The charrettes were not attended nearly as well as a Saturday meeting held at the senior center. The charrettes were held in a parking garage commercial lease space. Anyone not aware of this space would think the meeting was in the garage itself and may not have attended. Why were the charrettes not held at the senior center? Members of the DPZ staff were seen adding comments to the drawings and lists. The purpose was to obtain public opinion, not DPZ to inject their views. Several of the survey questions were slanted toward desired outcomes. The survey, unfortunately, could be taken multiple times if the device cache was cleared each time. There is a good chance that some of the data is slanted toward desired outcomes. This may be redundant to the previous comments. I didn't know Chuck was going to be here. I was sitting at the table during the charrette that was interrupted by the City Commission's consigliere, Jim Razor, verbal assault on Chuck Semchina. Jim was critical of no to rezoning signs that are popping up all over town. These no to rezoning signs are even more appropriate after reviewing the master plan draft summary. Razor was also critical of newspaper articles dealing with the Commission's no-bid contracts, which was out of context with the charrette subject. The intent was clearly an attempt to disrupt the meeting, but for what purpose? The meeting disruption terminated with the Q&A portion of the meeting, terminated the Q&A portion of the meeting before I had an opportunity to speak. I understand also that the criminal complaint has been referred to the county prosecutor by the city attorney, and it's being slow-walked. I'm really disappointed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to close the public. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Please come up. Yes.
This will be a little redundant, but that's life. Okay, earlier this year, small postcards were sent to unaware residents. These are likely the smallest card allowed by the post office, certainly smaller than typical flyers, with information considerably less important than those with the information regarding our homes. Many residents stated they never received them. It could be because cards like that can easily slide into the garbage with the rest of flyers. This followed our time at Churchill, where I understood that the vast majority wanted to keep their neighborhoods as is. Based on the so-called draft we have now, doesn't seem to be so. This was followed by morning meetings scheduled during, at the time, when residents were not available. Therefore, a limited number of residents were present, including some representing from the city. The McKenna representatives' tutorials resulted in leaving hardly any time for our input or questions. One of the sessions, if I remember correctly, was a nonstop statistics with no time remaining, so no more input. The video appeared to be turned off before we could ask questions in a couple other occasions. There were so many when this went on and off. I don't even know if it was one of the daytimes and night times. Also, representatives of Ferndale and Birmingham took up speaking time, promoting advantages of proposed changes. Of course, I don't know everyone in those cities, but I do know several residents, and they are extremely upset. The evening gathering, no need to explain this, I think most of us have been there, had additional representatives to point out charts, drawings, etc., and how these changes would be. I asked one of the zoning about the zoning change. She said, oh, there would be none. I said, well, that's not what I heard. I disagreed with her, so she took me over to the person that was running this, and he said, well, she's correct, that there would be a change in land use, which would require zoning changes. I mean, it's not even funny. You heard me. I think ethics are lacking. It seems to me that notification of potential changes either doesn't happen or is not made sufficiently in advance. Prior excuses are questionable. It is obviously not enough time to see what's planned for us. These occasions are not democratic. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I see two more hands. How about you?
Non-agenda items, the master plan's on later.
Isn't that a different
Public comment.
Is that a different meeting or the same meeting?
This is non-agenda items.
Nancy Poprowski, 1119 Batavia. Thank you for letting me speak.
Definition of civility, formal politeness, and courtesy in behavior, the act of showing regards to others. This was not the case during a May Master Plan charrette meeting when an appointed citizen to the meeting went off topic and verbally assaulted another citizen. It was a scary disruption, especially for the seniors and innocent bystanders who couldn't leave the out-of-control scene quickly. No one in authority has ever apologized or tried to make contact with the victims in the audience. I spent or volunteered 6 days and nights of my time to attend all but one charrette meeting. I'm dedicated to my city and its future. My last questions, along with others, were not answered due to the chaos. If we as adults cannot control ourselves, whether it's over a parking spot in a parking lot, cutting into a grocery line, cutting people off on the freeway, or in this case, verbally assaulting in an aggressive manner a person sitting and minding their own business without any apology or repercussions, people, well, how will it end is what I want to know. We cannot be allowed to continue to bully because we can. We talk about children constantly getting bullied on the internet and at school. So how will that stop if so-called adults can't even control themselves at public meetings? Civility is important, along with acknowledging those who were victimized. So please, let's try to fix this problem and act like adults. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I see a hand in the back there.
Good evening. I'm Chris Meister, and I live in Vincetta in Royal Oak. And what I've heard in this public comment really has me floored. I've lived in Royal Oak since 1995, moved here because it was such a wonderful community, and now I'm wondering what's happened to it. I mean, it's the, this is our city. It's, it's not the government city. The government's supposed to be representing us and giving us notice for these meetings. Let us know that these are serious issues that are being decided here. And the whole idea of the architect's stamp being used, I mean, that's appalling. And, I don't know the details, but I assume that there'd be an investigation, and how whoever was involved was ever allowed to do business with the city again, I can't imagine. And I'm just saying that I question whether or not this is still the wonderful community that I moved in, and whether or not we can get it back. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else? Last time I missed a hand. Okay, over here.
Hi, Kathy Grant, Elmhurst. And I too was at the charrettes, and I too witnessed the attack. This was on Tuesday, May 16th. Nearing the end of the 12 to 1 p.m. meeting, Jim Razor, sitting a few seats from Chuck Semchina, began yelling very loudly and verbally attacking Chuck. Jim Razor was yelling something about yard signs popping up all over the city. Jim Razor was not acknowledged by the moderator, and he just exploded. This was totally unprovoked and definitely unrelated to the topic being discussed at this session. Jim Razor then stood up and began to move toward Chuck in an aggressively threatening manner, all while continuing to yell and using foul language. Chuck stood up, walked to the opposite direction, around the end of the table and toward the exit. I was horrified by Jim Razor's behavior, and I felt this was a ploy to shut everything down and not discuss any topic further. I was really concerned that the cameras were turned off or somehow the tape got corrupted. I was concerned when the consultants and the city officials who were present said nothing to stop this outrageous behavior. Quite frankly, I was worried about the safety of the senior women and senior adults that were at the same table. Some of them sitting on rollator walkers. Those aren't easy to move backwards when somebody is approaching you. Me as a nurse, I know this, okay? This was a disturbance of a public meeting. I think that's a misdemeanor. I'm not a lawyer. And which abruptly ended. I'm concerned about the seniors that were there. Are they intimidated now? They're not going to show up at any public meetings anymore? All right? This has been 2 months now. This is an assault and disorderly display at a public meeting. I expect legal resolution on this. Justice delayed is no justice at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Public comment, non-agenda item. I'm scanning because I don't want to miss anybody. All right, I don't see anybody else. So I'm going to close the public comment and we'll move on to unfinished business, which includes a preliminary report to establish Vincetta Bridges Historical District. Mr. Twing, tell us about this.
Turn the mic on. You saw this preliminary report at your May 9th, 2023 meeting. It regards a title of a preliminary historic district entitled Vincetta Bridges. If you recall, the report had also identified open space as part of the district that went from Lawndale to 12 Mile along Vincetta. One of the features in the report related to the bridges that cross the median. Other parts of the report address the open space and trees that were identified within that preliminary report. The Planning Commission's role in the creation of a local historic district is to review it and provide a recommendation to the City Commission regarding whether the historic district is consistent with the goals and objectives of the city. The only issue that staff raised in May is the same issue as you'll see in the report, was there are utilities within the right-of-way of Vincetta, and as was indicated in the report, that we would ask that your resolution include an exemption for any work that's needed from requirement of a certificate of appropriateness in relation to repair and maintenance or replacement of those utilities and for routine maintenance of trees and other plant material that might be necessary by the Department of DPS without seeking, as I said, that certificate of appropriateness from the Historic District Commission, given the delays that may cause in addressing issues going forward. As I indicated, that was both from the engineering department and the planning staff. It was reviewed with the city attorney as well, the interim city attorney, and he has concurred with that's an option for your consideration. You will see that there is an attached report or letter from the chair of the Historic District Study Committee. I won't go through that. Hopefully you've had a chance to read it. With that, if there's questions on the item, I'll be happy to attempt to address them.
Are there questions for Mr. Twing? All right, seeing none, do we have a petitioner here? Please introduce yourself. Tell us why you are seeking this relief or recommendation.
My name is Tamis Donaldson, and I'm the chairperson of the Historic District Study Committee, and I'm the one who, along with the committee, wrote the letter. So I thought I'd just do a little refresher on historic preservation. So I know we're kind of dealing with this local bridges, but really it's a national, it starts with the federal government. So the federal government sets guidelines, and the guidelines are through the national park system. I don't know why it's the national park system, but that's what it is. So they set the guidelines, and then the state approves those guidelines, and then then it goes to the local, and we approve the state guidelines. So under ordinance, we followed the ordinance for historic preservation. And so the historic preservation is under 3 parts. The Historic District Study Committee, which we study projects to see if they determine if they're suitable or not. And then the Historic District Commission, and then they review things that have been approved historic districts to see if they need any changes, and so they approve that their changes would be appropriate. So within our parameters, when we have a historic district, we follow the National Park System guidance under rehabilitation. So rehabilitation means we're not stopping anything in time. It means things still continue on, but we need to adopt and correct things if possible. So under rehabilitation, there's 2 segments once a historic district has been made, and one is maintenance, and maintenance doesn't have to be approved by anybody. You can go ahead, if you have to trim a branch, you trim a branch. If you have to mow the lawn, you mow the lawn. If you have to remove snow, you remove snow. Maintenance is just approved as far as normal procedure. So if they wanted to do something a little more, let's say they wanted to repair the bridge, then it would become under WROK, under the ordinance. And so WROK has to go through the Historic District Commission. And they decide if it's appropriate type of repair. So I know that there's a concern about this, I suppose, open space, but really that whole area is based on like a parkland feeling. I mean, if that wasn't there, the whole placemaking of that neighborhood wouldn't be there. I mean, that's the whole feeling of the neighborhood, is this park-like feeling as it runs through the old Red Run River with those beautiful bridges. So we do realize that things happen. I mean, we've got utilities and things like that going on. And so within our historic district, we don't include the road, we don't include the curb. It's everything on the inside of the curb, with the open space and then the bridges. So we've also become a certified local government, which means we get technical assistance from the State Historic Preservation Office. So we asked them about our situation, and they said, well, if utilities have to come through, then you would go through an administrative review. But we can't exempt, either you're in or you're out. That's kind of what it comes down to. We can't exempt anything from the historic district. But I think we offer some alternatives with the idea that maintenance is normal, and if you have to go through the procedure, if you have to do a repair onto the bridge, you go through the HDC. If you have to do utilities, then it goes through an administrative within the city approval. So we're trying to be appropriate and adaptable as much as possible. But we feel it's worth it because we think it's a great attribute to the city, these bridges. I mean, nobody else has bridges like this. I mean, we're the only ones, so I think we have to take care of them.
All right, other questions for the petitioner?
As an example of what's happening now, because you submitted this a couple months ago, and then right now there's some work going on, including adding sidewalks. In that example, would that have been something that would have gone through the Historic Commission to have a negotiation on the design, for example? Given this, is that what your preference would have been given?
It would go through the HDC, Historic District Commission. So they go through, they review it, they say that's appropriate, or that needs to be a different material, or but I mean, the Historic District Commission, I mean, they are reasonable people, and they work with you. So I can't see that they would deny it. We actually thought, when we heard about it, we thought, that is a good idea. It's got safety. We like safety. We don't want people walking across the bridges while a car's coming across, so I didn't see a
And just to restate what you said, then, just to make sure I understand. So it's the bridges themselves, and then the green space along that greenway is what you're looking to protect
in between,
under the historical
that median.
preservation. Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at the picture of the bridge on my screen. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Douglas.
So your proposal specifically singles out and identifies trees. are they, I mean, I doubt that they were planted in 1916 or 1919, whenever it was. They've been planted subsequently.
Right.
So do you single them out because they need to remain? I mean, why have you singled them out in that way?
Well, because when we do a historic district study report, one of the steps we have to take is it goes through the State Historic Preservation Office. They have a review board, and it only meets 3 times a year, so you really got to have everything together to meet with them. So they met, and then they said, we want more information on that open space. You need to tell us about the trees. So we're like, okay, we'll tell you about the trees. So we were just satisfying what they required. But we know trees die and trees grow, and you have to accommodate. But so is the State Historic Preservation Office. The review board wanted to see that documented.
So a hypothetical, there's a silver maple tree in that, and we know that how vulnerable those are.
Yes.
If we needed to remove that tree, if it were dying and suitably identified by our staff of arborists, would that removal constitute routine maintenance, or would that require the HDC's approval?
Well, there's always gray areas, it seems like, and that might be a gray area.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if silver maples are notorious for, their short life, and I would think that the HDC would understand, and I'm sure that they would approve, like, the tree has to go. I mean, we're not trying to save things that are unsafe, and that would be unsafe.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, I got a couple questions, unless you guys down here do.
I guess I'm struggling with how do we designate a living thing, a tree, as a historic district?
Well, you have national park systems there.
Well, I again, just humor me here, because I'm still trying to grasp a little what this is. I'm not against the project. I'm just wondering if you designate a tree as a historic district, eventually that tree's going to die. I mean,
Well, it's not the tree, it's the whole open space.
Okay, well, the conversation I just heard, if we got to remove the tree, then we got to go through some rigmarole to remove the tree. It's a tree in the city of Royal Oak that comes under the responsibility of the DPS and the arborist. But are you saying we have to go through now this historic group to get a permission to take a tree down?
It's a pretty easy step. I mean, you call the HDC chairperson, they have a meeting, they vote on it, and you're done. I mean,
well, yeah, the process itself is great. I'm just wondering why we need the process. That's all.
Well, I guess like I said, it's kind of a gray area. I don't know. I mean, if it's a tree dying, is it maintenance or is it work? I don't really have the answer. Seems like it's maintenance.
I just wanted to make a related comment. I think there are such things as heritage trees, and there's lots of designations for trees that are also designated historical, and then they have a preservation attached to them, similar to the tree that's still standing outside where the former city hall was. And so I understand quite distinctly why the landscaping and the trees could be included. And so I just wanted to comment that that's quite feasible, that they would be included. And then, of course, if one is dangerous, as you're saying, the process would be pretty straightforward.
Commissioner Douglas.
Well, and I certainly appreciate the fact that landscape architecture is historic, and in preserving it is important. And I do understand that it's the feel of it, it's the movement along the path. It isn't each individual tree that makes that designatable in terms of the landscape architect who did it and the quality of his work.
I'll just make a quick question. So you just brought up landscape architect. Was there a landscape architect who did the median here? Because I'll tell you something, I don't notice if there was.
Well, originally the Mason Brown, there's a lot of Mason Browns, and so there's a Mason Brown of this generation, there's a generation before, but the original Mason Brown was a civil engineer also did landscape within his practice. Okay. So he was the original civil engineer and the original landscape person of Vincetta Boulevard.
Okay.
But we can't find any. We searched high and low, and we talked to Mason Brown of the current number 3 to find out if there's any documents, and we can't come up with anything. So we don't have any current information on is there a current. I mean, there isn't a current landscape architect, but we don't know anything about the past.
Right, I'm going to I got to dial back here. First of all, I read, when this came before us a couple months ago, I read through your report. It's a wonderful, you put a wonderful story together to tell the history and everything. I really appreciated the whole report. It was very interesting and enlightening. What I don't understand, and I apologize for this, but you got to go right back to the beginning. I need to understand why this is even being proposed. First of all, who is responsible for maintaining those bridges?
Well, who's been maintaining them?
I don't know. I'm asking you.
I've been wondering nobody's maintaining them.
Okay, and who's responsible for maintaining the median?
The city.
Okay,
The city.
That's the city?
The city.
Okay.
The city for the bridges and the...
So is the city also responsible for the bridges?
Well, the city's responsible for everything in the right-of-way. I believe when the engineering was going to do some improvements here, they were actually considering taking them down. And I believe the city engineers met with the Historic Study Committee group, and as part of that discussion, when the city commission approved the sidewalk plan, they've left them up. I think the city engineer and the city would not maintain them if it was left to the city. We would remove them and put a new bridge in.
Okay.
Or a new right-of-way.
Okay, so that is that a motivation to have the historic designation so they don't get taken down?
Yes.
Okay, but they are in a deteriorating progress quite significantly. Is this designation going to provide any funding mechanism that could be used to restore them?
Well, so like I said before, that we became a certified local government through the State Historic Preservation Office just last year, and part of what we get with that is technical advice from the State Historic Preservation Office, but also we're eligible for grants, and we do have it on our backlog that we would like to apply for a grant to get those bridges repaired. And
okay, and do you need this historic designation in order to make that grant application?
yes.
Okay.
And we can't guarantee that. I never use it as an argument because I can't guarantee that we'll get that.
Is that your intention?
Yes.
Okay, because it seems to me that the bridges need work on them, and
yes.
somebody's going to have to pay for that. And I guess what I'm hearing is that the city would have to pay for it, and they're not excited about doing that. And you're saying that maybe if you get a historic district, you can get some money.
Yes.
All right. Have you had an engineer look at those bridges?
No. So far within what we do, we just study what's there. We haven't really gotten into the structural integrity of it.
Okay.
That would have to happen if we decided, if they did become a historical district and you did want to go ahead with maintenance, then we would have to have that analyzed.
Okay, well, the feasibility of repairing them and restoring them into some semblance of their original self would probably be a factor, and at least in my thinking. If that can't be done, then I'm not sure what the benefit is.
It can be done. I know a lot of people in historic preservation trades, and I've been just talking and asking people about it. So,
all right.
They didn't say throw in the towel. They said continue on.
All right, and these are engineers or architects?
Mostly the tradespeople.
Okay,
and engineer.
Tradespeople then. Okay.
Historic preservation tradespeople.
Okay. All right. I think Mr. Ellison has another question.
Okay, we're talking 4 bridges, right?
Yes.
Each one of those bridges is in a different state of disrepair or repair.
Yes.
One of them has even lost the slope. It's flat, so it's not really a bridge. It's just a passway.
Yes.
So what you're saying is that designating these as, I think maybe we designate each one individually, each bridge individually, rather than the whole district. But it's just an idea that popped in my head. But you've got grants that can restore these bridges back to their original condition or just to a operating condition, because a number of those bridges have been hit by cars and then patched, but not with any delicacy. It just
right.
And I would assume somebody's car insurance paid for that maybe, but if we keep repairing them back to some kind of midpoint, I mean, yeah, they're there, they're historic. Are we biting off more than we want to chew? I don't know. It just, because each bridge is in a different, one of them is really nice. And there's one of them that doesn't have a road anymore. So, I don't know. I'm struggling with this.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're all important because it creates this pathway, you know, it's like this rhythm, bridge, bridge, bridge. I mean, it's a pathway of this open space that I think is important. It's not just one element, it's this whole sequence of passageway.
But one of them's not even a bridge anymore, so could that be restored back to a bridge?
Well, honestly, none of them are bridges anymore.
Well, no, but some of them still have the arch, so the actual design of a bridge over a creek is still there.
There's
But
always, these hearsay stories, and so the hearsay story is that the kids at 2 o'clock in the morning would take their cars and they try and get air.
Yeah, okay.
And so they hit air and they come down and so one of the guys that lived in the neighborhood, a judge apparently, said, I'm sick of hearing that noise at 2 o'clock in the morning. You got to get rid of that hump. So apparently he did. And that's why the one hump is gone, because somebody's like, I can't.
Gone for a while, yeah. So.
It's just a hearsay story, but it's a good story.
Let's continue.
I think this question might be for the city attorney or Mr. Twing. It's really around if a historic district were established for this area, would that in any way affect any of the adjacent property owners on the other side of Vincetta in terms of any future use of those properties in relation to the historic district that's right across the street at that point?
No, based on the proposal, it's basically the boulevard area. It's not even the drive lanes.
Okay, so no way encumbers any adjacent property because it's sort of, it's a...
That's correct. That's how we see it.
And you've, okay, not seeing another hand up, I just decided to pop off here. You've objected to the department's proposed language. Can you explain exactly why?
Well, when we got the letter, we thought we better talk to the State Historic Preservation Office, and they said that the way everything's set up, it just doesn't provide for exclusions. And so they said, instead of an exclusion, that we have established that you can have a administrative approval. So let's just say you had to cut down a tree, you would go to the Parks Department and say, we have to get rid of this tree, and things like that could go through efficiently. That's what the State Historic Preservation Office has told us, that's a slippery slope that we want to go down. We want to be very careful that we're not exempting things we shouldn't exempt.
All right, and in your letter, do you have some proposed language that you would prefer to accomplish that?
So far, we might need some assistance from the attorney, but pretty much they said administratively approved by the city is what we're getting from the State Historic Preservation Office.
Okay.
To work, so utility work within the medium, so I guess it would be utility work within the medium could be administrated by the city.
And tree maintenance as well?
You can include tree maintenance, that's fine, because I mean, with Ann's question or comment, there's not really any trees there of, that are, what'd you call them again? Heritage tree, thank you. There aren't any heritage trees there, but the trees are important there because they create this parkland. But because there aren't heritage trees, I think you can include trees into the administrative approval if you wanted to. So I don't have language, no, but I'd be...
I just wanted to make a related comment, because when I first read this, also whenever it came before us before, I sort of had the same reaction that you came back with in your letter, just independently, that we have observed in Royal Oak, and maybe this is something in the state of Michigan that's kind of common, where, again, DTE, utilities, and others don't feel like they can be facilitated by the local government, and so mistakes are made, things are done that maybe aren't ideal, whether it's digging up a street multiple times or having something like this go where something gets ripped out that should be protected. And I guess I thought and I don't know if we need more wordsmithing and maybe to postpone to a different meeting, but I would not like to see it where it's just a free-for-all, because then the historic preservation is kind of minimized.
Yes.
And as far as those bridges and the green space is concerned, and even if we were ever able to greenlight the water that's under there, again, given the climate change, different things, I think we have to think about all of those things in this context. Anyway, and so I'm supportive of your request for a modification, so it's not as easy to make exceptions with the understanding that obviously regular maintenance has to be done, but also maybe looking forward to updating and making the bridges more substantial.
Commissioner Douglas.
So we are considering here local designation of this area.
That's correct.
The SHPO has weighed in and guided your documents.
Yes.
But do they ultimately bless that decision, or is the final decision here in the city of Royal Oak?
The final decision is the city in Royal Oak. They do not do that.
Okay, so, because otherwise you'd be seeking state designation. which
Yeah,
you're
no,
not.
yep.
So the language, I mean, when I have to make these decisions, I look to our interim city attorney and our community development director and our professional staff, and so I'm inclined to support the language that they have proposed, especially since it doesn't affect our it's our designation, it's our conditions, and it doesn't affect anything up the line. Unless would it affect our, you probably don't know this, our grant applications.
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
That would be the question. But I will say that I'm swayed by the work of the professional staff here as opposed to the interpretation of the SHPO, again, especially since it's our designation.
Other comments? So, Mr. Twing, in order to move this forward or wherever, we would need to settle on language that we would agree to and vote on. That's what it sounds like. We could deny the request, or we could not recommend it. We don't deny it. We're making a recommendation. We could not recommend it. Can we recommend it without the verbiage, and recommend it that the verbiage be sharpened up?
Well, obviously, you can pass whatever resolution as far as a recommendation that you would like to forward to the city commission that you deem appropriate and the board supports. You are, again, procedurally, you are simply providing a recommendation to the city commission. If the city commission supports that recommendation and actually wants to create a local historic district, the city attorney's office would draft an ordinance creating that district with the wording in it as directed by the city commission. It is staff's opinion that that should exempt. We don't have any objection to the local designation. We just simply want to clarify that any utility, any maintenance work is exempt from having to go to the Historic District Commission and getting their blessing. Part of the reason for that is time delays. There may be emergency action. There are county utilities under there that aren't going to care whether there's a local designation or not. They're just going to do what work they need to do. But the other part of it is it's an administrative approval. If it's planned work, the city commission is going to see that work. They're going to approve funding for the utility work, and they'll have input on whether or not all the trees that are in the way need to be removed or not. It would simply be a second step in the staff's mind to also have to go to the Historic District Commission to get that blessing once the city commission says go and do forth. It seems like duplicate effort and two bodies that may take different action. So that's where our objection is that we see it as an unnecessary step when the city commission is going to have input on that major work that the city's planning on doing, if ever in the future. In terms of administrative approval of removal of a tree, DPS will do that based on the expertise input. There's no permit issued to remove a tree. It's just going to happen. There's no step that would stop staff from taking that tree down. So there would be no step to get there. The tree would be gone and then somebody would object. I don't know of a step where the DPS department comes and asks for a permit. It's identified as an unsafe tree and it's removed.
All right, I have a question for the petitioner. Again, I wasn't sure what the objection was. If we pass, we recommended in the city passes this local historic designation, but the maintenance issues are not required to go through the historic district, does that in some way impair your ability to seek grant money?
Well, I'm not a grant expert. I might become one, but I'm not one yet.
Well, I mean, to me, I think I agree with you that the sentiment that this area has a special feel to it, that if you took the bridges out, it would impact that. It would diminish that charm that is there. But on the other hand, you can't let them deteriorate like they are. They're not in good shape. So if this process will allow us to preserve the bridges because we can get grant money, then I would be in favor. If that's not the case, well, then we have to think about how we're doing this.
Well, that is our intent. If we can pull it off, that's the question. But the first step is getting them historically designated, so then we can work on a grant to really, first we'd have to have them analyzed by a structural engineer and possibly a tradesperson. That would be the first step for a grant, and then it would be the repair of the bridges. But that is our intent, that we just don't let the bridges just fall apart, because so far that's what's happening. We want these bridges to be a gem in the neighborhood, and so we want them repaired. If we can get a grant, that is our goal.
Okay, and just one other question. Is there a Vincetta subdivision group that has any involvement in the bridge preservation effort?
I don't know. Do you know anything?
I thought the one was on east side of Crooks, but I don't think on the west or south side.
Yeah, I just wonder, is there people who live in the neighborhood, are they rallying behind this? Are they willing to get involved and maybe even do a fundraiser for them? I don't know how much it costs to fix it.
We just got an email that I will read to you. This is, because this was published in one of the newsletters that went out, somebody responded and they said, I read the recent republished report on the Vincetta bridges with great interest. I have lived at 1919 Cedar Hill for over 33 wonderful years, so that many of my trips back and forth across the bridges. I did not, however, know just how old they are. I now have even greater appreciation for them and their fine craftsmanship. It was also most interesting to learn more details of the Vincetta part and the intentions behind its creation. While my home is relatively new, built in 1941, I am blessed to be a part of this lovely area. I sincerely hope that this report is one that will be viewed with favor so that the bridges will be protected and mended as needed. Like other residents, I think restoring them will be a welcome for aesthetic and safety purposes. I'm glad the report was included in the weekly city newsletter. I may not have learned about the additional history and activity. I would be glad to hear about what decision is made about the bridges and ongoing contributions to our fine and lovely city. Karen Davis. So, sounds like neighborhood has support.
All right. Is that a hand or not a hand? Okay. There you go.
I have a question first, Mr. Twang. With regard to the language that the city prefers that you have in there, when you say exemption, if we pass the if the historic district moves forward and there is some protection, even with the exemption, is there some mechanism by which work that's being done there lets people know that they should not be damaging this because we are protecting it? What's the mechanism? I think the language change is so slight in maybe that one checkpoint, because again, if we want to preserve and enhance things that we have, I think there has to be some way of managing that. And I wonder if that is adequate with that word exempt, because otherwise we risk losing it even though we have the historic designation.
Well, if you, and again, there is no staff objection to putting this area in a local historic district. Okay, so the intent of putting the protection that would be there is there. The question then is, where is the approval process for any work that might be done in the public right-of-way? This is all of the other local historic districts in Royal Oak are on private property. And so if anybody's going to do any work on private property, they obviously need certain permits potentially, or other activity that is an automatic checkpoint there. That isn't necessarily true here. Where the checkpoint is if the city engineer is going to do planned work, they generally budget it. It goes to the city commission for budget approval and what work is going to be done. So the city commission is going to see it and maintain and take care of those things, that resources that they believe are important. It seems like a duplicative step to take it to another board and ask for their input. The city commission could clearly refer it to the historic district committee if they wanted to, but to make it an automatic on a planned work is, and again, duplicative and counter to the commission's directives. If it's emergency work, it's not going there anyways. It's just going to get taken care of. The road's going to get dug up. If there's trees in the way, they're going to get taken care of. It's just going to happen. It's not going to wait. There's no permits issued for the emergency work.
Okay, thank you.
Did Nick have something to?
Well, so apropos of that, it sometimes seems like, let's just name names here, Consumers Energy sort of appears on a street and starts digging things up with a backhoe. But they do need permits. They do need, so they do go through the engineering department, and the engineering department has a tickler system or a way of going, historic district.
They could, well, they don't have one right now because the only ones we have are on the building department.
Right.
So this is not an address, it's a public right-of-way.
Right.
It would have to create a new mechanism for taking care of that, not only in engineering, but also in DPS.
Right. Okay, good. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, and maybe this is, you look like you were going to say something, but this is a recommendation. So if we were to recommend this with the language that the department has suggested, it doesn't have to end up like this. I think there's been questions raised here, in I think all our minds, but if we were to recommend it, it still could be edited before the city commission votes on it, and there might be an opportunity for more information to be exchanged. Would that be correct?
That's correct, and as you correctly know, it's a recommendation purely to the commission. The commission is free to do anything they want. They can adopt an ordinance, they can draft or direct the ordinance drafted in any manner they see fit. They can choose to ignore this and do nothing and not choose to establish the historic district if they wanted to. So it's truly up to them, but I think, and I wanted to expand on Mr. Kling's comments, I think it's important to maybe take into consideration a couple of observations. The Historic Study Commission and the Historic District Commission are creations of the city commission. So they are subsidiary commissions to the city commission in this case. So I think it's kind of counterintuitive to ask a subsidiary, to have the city commission or the city ask a subsidiary commission, being the historic district, for a certificate of appropriateness to replace or repair critical infrastructure that lies under that boulevard. It's my understanding there's quite large drains under there that could need emergency repairs. And there's nothing in the law that would restrict the city commission from enacting or approving an ordinance that establishes a historic district but also creates certain carve-outs for exceptions in that historic district designation if they chose to do so. Again, clearly up to the commission if they choose to do so. But I think part of the the struggle from staff's perspective is you're kind of asking yourself permission to do work in your own backyard, so to speak. So, and I think that's where the struggle has come and where some of and that's why we thought we came up with a creative solution to provide the designation for the historic district, but at the same time, allow the city to do, or the utilities to do what they need to do for that critical infrastructure, whether it's repair or replace.
I have to ask my wife, is that the same thing?
All right, here's hearing that and hearing Mr. Twing and the rest of it, it seems to me that this is only a recommendation. If my concern is if there's some reason that the grant is impaired between now and the time this comes before the City Commission, Ms. Donaldson can get her information and she can make her presentation to the City Commission, but if the sense of this committee is that, boy, we'd like to see those things restored, then my suggestion would be that we pass the resolution as provided by the department, and if it needs to be improved or changed in order to enhance the ability to get grants, then they can do it upstream. But I don't know why this would have to stay here.
Mr. Chair, I'll move the resolution as submitted by department.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, seconded by Commissioner Douglas. Is there further discussion?
Is there going to be any public comment?
No, it's not a public hearing.
Okay.
Do you have a comment?
Well, then, let me finish my thought then. Yeah, I will not be supporting a motion to recommend. I just very simply don't feel like I've heard from enough professionals in terms of the viability of the bridges. I haven't heard from any engineering experts if they can even be salvaged. I think it really ties the city's hands in ways that we may not necessarily be doing ourselves any favors in terms of the work that may need to be done that we can't anticipate moving forward. So for those reasons, I won't be supporting.
All right, other comments? Mr. Ellison.
I moved it forward because it's simply time to move it forward. I've been around long enough to know that we will keep playing with these historic district recommendations until they finally, the buildings get so old they fall down. We just need to move. And as it was pointed out, there is still time if we need to fine tune language or we need to add stuff in there. But basically what this resolution is saying is the Planning Commission has looked at this. We have no problem with it. And so we're going to move it forward, and then the City Commission can do with it whatever they want. That's the way I'm looking at it.
Ms. Beakey.
I just wanted to articulate that I support this, and again, I look forward to, again, considering how we can retain and improve assets as we incorporate new things in the city.
Mr. Gantina.
I just wanted to state that I sort of agree with Commissioner Douglas's comments about trusting in the city staff and their expertise and the language that they've created and put in front of us. And to Mr. Ellison's point, this is, it seems like this body is generally in favor of establishing this district. There certainly could be changes that happen before the City Commission acts, but our purview is really to just move this forward or not, and I would be in favor of the recommendation as well, with the language that's been proposed, again, citing the reasons of the work that staff's done.
All right, any other comments? Okay, we have a motion on the table by Mr. Ellison to recommend the establishment of the historic districts with the resolution language provided by the department, seconded by Commissioner Douglas. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Yes. All opposed?
No.
Okay, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor, 1 opposed. Motion to recommend passes. Okay, thank you very much.
All right,
and good luck.
Good job. This is hard, and you did a good job.
All right, thanks a lot.
Okay, I gotta find my agenda. Okay, next order of business under other business is the rules of procedure. Is that our attorney or Mr. Twing who's going to introduce this?
Well, I can start it since it was the memos from the planning division. You may recall at your June meeting, you did adopt consolidated and revised rules and procedures to cover both the Planning Commission and the Brownfield Authority. There were two items in one of the sections of those that you referred back to staff for some revised wording and clarification on submission. Those were section 413, subparagraphs I and J, and they had to do with motions to reconsider an item or motions to rescind an item. What you have in front of you is the wording that was redrafted in its entirety by staff and reviewed by the city attorney, and it is recommended for your consideration, modification, or approval.
Counselor, any comments?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. We took the commission's comments afterwards and incorporated all those changes. Hopefully, the commission's satisfied with the proposed revisions to those procedures for those 2 points, and if you concur, we'd ask that you consider adopting the proposed resolution.
All right, I'm just going to say for myself, this is acceptable language to me, but if anybody has any comments, let's hear them.
Ms. Casada, I'm prepared to make a motion to adopt the proposed amendments to section 4.13 subparagraphs I and J of the Planning Commission Rules of Procedure as presented by staff.
Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Ms. Beakey. All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Esby to adopt the proposed language, seconded by Ms. Beakey. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I thought I was supposed to say yes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda is non-action items. So that's got to be Mr. Twing.
Those items are simply for your information. There's a copy of the Michigan Planner publication as well as administrative site plan approvals that have occurred. Unless you have questions, there's no action necessary.
Are there questions for Mr. Twing? All right, hearing none, we will move on past the non-action items, and we will seek a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved. Or seconded?
Yeah, let me move it, but I'd like to add a 10-minute break. Can we do a 10-minute break?
The motion is to adjourn with a 10-minute break. Is that second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Douglas. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 10-minute break, folks.
What is the deal with the yes or the aye? I thought we were switching.
I thought it was yes, too.
I was just looking for a clock.
Isn't that what half the meeting was about last week? Or last month?
It's all Gary's fault. He keeps saying aye.
It's supposed to be yes, right?
Welcome back. We're going to commence the next section of tonight's events here. I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the master plan work session, and we'll introduce ourselves again. Ms. Beakey, can you start?
Good evening, Ann Beakey.
Clyde Esbury.
Charlene Douglas, City Commissioner.
Tim Twing, Director of Community Development.
Nick Krajewski, Interim City Attorney.
Woody Gantino.
Jim Ellison.
Joseph Murphy, Director of Planning.
And I'm Gary Casada, the chairperson. So we are going to get a introduction of where we're at with the master plan. Who is taking the lead in the department here? Mr. Murphy.
So included in your agenda packet today is DPZ's draft summary of the charrette, and that was the week-long process that occurred back in May, and also DPZ's draft recommendations on direction forward as we head toward the creation of the first draft version of the master plan. Again, their documentation that they provided to you today.
Are we supposed to have I don't have a copy. Did I miss it?
The hyperlink.
Oh, there it is. Oh, yeah. Okay. Never mind.
So what's presented in the agenda packet is not the first draft of the master plan, but DPZ's recommendations on moving forward. And so they're looking for some feedback from you and from everyone tonight. So we're once again joined by Matt Lambert from DPZ, if we can see his smiling face on the screen. There he is. He'll try and get through all the recommendations today. More than likely, probably not, so we'll pick up at a future meeting with those that we haven't gotten through. But Matt can highlight what he expects from you today. And I know you didn't have a lot of time to review it for tonight's meeting since it was posted last Friday. So we don't expect you to react to every line, everything in the document at this point in time. There'll be time for that later. But as noted in the document at the beginning in the summary, once this document is refined, The resulting goals and strategies are intended to be the source for another survey for public input as we head towards the first draft of the master plan. So that's my overview. Unless you have any questions for myself or Tim or Nick, I would suggest that we let Matt head straight into the recommendations.
Okay, two quick comments. Number one, just to clarify, and Matt can hear me, I'm sure, this is, you got two documents here. One of them is called Royal Oak Master Plan Directions. That is not a first draft of the master plan. This is a opportunity for you guys to share with us some directions, some options, and it's an opportunity for us, both as a city and a commission, to give you some feedback at this juncture, correct? Second thing is, I understand that when the commissioners are not talking, if we can turn off our microphones, that should help with the feedback. So I'm going to turn off my microphone, and I'm going to let our experts give us a presentation.
Sure. So on the first piece, the goal that we have, we share the document, which is initial direction. Our goal here is to sort of set the stage for writing the first draft of the master plan. So it's not a first draft. We did include some material that I think is a little further along than we had anticipated, because it would be helpful for your review and then for further public review. As Joseph mentioned, what we'd like to do is take this time to give a brief overview of each section and take any questions that you might have related to those sections. I'm not going to go through all the details. You'll have this to read over, and we'll schedule another time for any specific additional feedback. What we'd like to do is get that feedback for a revision and initial direction, and then share that in another public survey. We want to leave that one open for about a month, similar to the previous survey, so that we can get public input more broadly. Specifically, we'll also want to be thinking about what are the key items that we'd like to focus public input upon. It's not every single detail. We will have an opportunity for open-ended questions, but in terms of where we focus the questions overall. So as discussed in there were actually the two documents. There's the direction, which is essentially where we're synthesizing the direction that we feel we should be taking into the creation of the master plan. There's the summary of public input from the SHRET, which is it's a condensed version. It's long. There's a lot of it, but it's a condensed version of the input received during the charrette. We're still compiling all of the specific sticky notes into another document. I think that one is significantly longer, so that's not done, but the one that you have has all those sticky notes and input summarized, because a lot of the same themes were shared from individuals, but we will have the individual feedback as well. So into this document that we've shared, and the summary section is simple, just discussing a bit about the charrette, attendance, and so forth. There were more people in the evenings. We actually intended those daytime sessions to principally focus on specific topics and folks that we asked to brief us on the goings on of those topics, like Jim Tischler, who we invited to talk about housing affordability in the state, and we asked folks working on Woodward corridor plans in other cities to brief us on what's been going on in those areas. So those were specifically for us to get that sort of input. It turned out we had some public attendance with that, which did actually help us to direct some of the work there. But the main focus was in the evenings, where we had a number of people involved in activities where we're asking specific questions about different types of housing or the proposals that we had begun to create during the day. We'd put on the wall and ask questions specifically about those. And attendance varied and so forth, but we got a lot of good input. There's very much varied input. Some people feel strongly one way, and some people feel exactly the opposite way, and that's typical of any sort of planning process. That's what you'd expect, and we look forward to the opportunity to get your input and then further public input before we get started with the first master plan. One of the big things that came out of this, and I think what I'll do in this document is, if it works for you all, is go through just a little bit and then pause for some questions before going on to the next section, since there's a lot to touch on. So in the first piece, we really talk about aligning policies and the future land use. Now, the master plan, its primary objective is to set future land use policy. That's not zoning, it's related to zoning. It defines what sorts of uses may occur in an area over time. Adopting a future land use map doesn't change zoning. Zoning still needs to be changed separately. There's all sorts of ways that can happen, usually by petition of an individual property owner looking to develop, whatever it is on their property. But we found in this process, it was apparent that because of the current future land use map being very duplicative with the zoning map, that a lot of development has been occurring. Most development has been occurring using planned unit development as a process, and we do see that as a major issue because it is unpredictable. You don't really know where something can be developed at any point in time, and therefore, essentially, anything can be developed anywhere at any scale. And so that really causes a great deal of uncertainty, distrust, and it's also much more difficult to administer initially from a plan review standpoint, but also on the long run from the standpoint of city staff reviewing future rules for, say, redevelopment on a property that's been developed under a PUD. That can get tough. You haven't necessarily run into that issue yet, but we are working in places where it's really created a great deal of difficulty for staff to manage these negotiated rules. So that's something that we really think needs to occur through this process, is to set a future land use that, as we see it, is determining where growth should occur and where it should not occur, what format that should take, and how that interacts with the areas around it, with the goals of really increasing sustainability. We think there's a lot, and we discussed in this plan, there's a lot that can be advanced in terms of the reduction of transportation greenhouse gas emissions, which is not significantly covered in the SCAP, because it really does have to do with future land use. It's not so much about buildings and other elements, to advance goals around aging in community as well, and to advance goals around housing cost. So those are all related to where and what format growth can occur. So we did put a draft map in here.
I just wanted you to know that when you show your screen, we can't see you at all. So I don't know if sometimes you want to toggle back and forth, just because sometimes it's hard to see I don't know, it might be helpful just for people to understand a little bit more clearly. Anyway.
So like when I'm talking for a while?
Yeah, it just makes it a little bit, when you're just showing written words, I don't know if anyone else can see it, but it might be helpful to see sometimes when you're talking.
Okay. Well, I will go back here because I have that. And I did want to point out here on this page, we did draft up a proposed future land use map. We had a sketch of this during the charrette. There were some questions. Well, what does it mean, one area versus the other? So we took a first pass at describing what those areas are. Now, overall, the goal of this map and how this relates to what we were discussing in terms of sustainability, aging, and housing costs, is to really concentrate growth in places we see here in these yellow areas and in the darker yellow areas, and in the red and in the purple, those are really, places for growth of different types. In the gray are the existing, the vast majority of the existing neighborhood fabric, with the goal of retaining that fabric. Now, we support those other goals by, one, identifying places for growth, so that from a policy standpoint, we can say, growth here on 12 Mile is enabled. This is of a type, and in this case, it's the medium scale flex residential, which is meant to be of a scale of a smaller size of building and of a height that is not significantly impactful to adjacent housing. But there are other areas, say over here, where there is already a great deal of multifamily housing, and this is a slightly higher scale of development. Or similarly along 13 Mile, which is a more substantial road, higher speed. And so we're identifying through this areas of more significant infill on corridors, lower scale infill on corridors, and then these neighborhood main streets and nodes. These are in purple. And those are essentially existing places that already have commercial uses today. The goal is to improve the quality of those commercial uses, add some housing, not a great deal of intensity, but some that is appropriate adjacent to neighborhoods, to aim for those uses to be related to the neighborhoods, such that it is easier to walk or bike to daily needs. And we'll discuss that a little bit more in a bit. And then the red areas are the sort of more intensive centers of activity, which are already intensive centers of activity. But in these cases, we're looking to the degree that they could accommodate some additional mixed use. In terms of downtown, we have some more specific recommendations. But in general, that those are places that have a greater deal of pull, that have a broader range of services, such that people don't have to travel as far in terms of driving and the associated GHG emissions. And then we identify the major schools and parks on here as well, because they're important structures of a neighborhood. So in general, that's the section on future land use. I did just want to mention this. It's a bit of an aside, but it's also important to consider Royal Oak's position within the larger region, because a lot of the pressures, both the issues of regional stormwater management, housing cost, the demand for living in Royal Oak have a lot to do with the greater region and the fact that there aren't that many places that have the qualities that Royal Oak does. Of course, Royal Oak's different from each of these other places identified. However, these are places that are presently walkable, have downtowns, have the ability to improve those such that as a whole, they're able to collectively affect the transportation greenhouse gases in the area around them. So we do want to bring up the region, but really focus on what are the goals here from a broad future land use perspective. In terms of climate, I think I discussed that. In terms of aging and community, that is providing opportunities within the neighborhood nodes and main streets and the corridors and activity centers for a broader array of housing types, incentivizing of seniors housing and services in those areas, so that they are near to existing neighborhoods to enable the housing cycle to change. And then we have some details on costs. So I'll get into the specifics on those, but in terms of what I've discussed so far, which is aligning policies, future land use, cleaning that up, and how it moves on to zoning, I did want to pause and see if you had any questions on that material or comments before moving on.
Not from the commission.
Okay. I'll continue. So from there, the document moves into specific areas of focus into sustainability and climate action. We discuss current efforts locally, such as the SCAP, other regional efforts, such as the Michigan Healthy Climate Plan, how those interact. We look at energy and buildings. Much of this is covered in the SCAP. There are additional things in the SCAP that in the actual master plan will coordinate more. We're pointing out some of the key aspects to addressing climate impacts from building energy use. There are a few things added in this particular instance, such as looking at the way that Ann Arbor is trying to address the ability to net meter and such. And also resiliency hubs are mentioned here. They're also discussed in the neighborhood node and Main Street section, and these are places that are also in the aging in place section. These are places where the community is able to gather in events where they may need assistance and to find information. So that's included there, as well as discussion on historic preservation and the adaptation of existing buildings. It moves on to mobility. In mobility, most of the elements related to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, which is through reducing the amount of driving, but also doing that by making it easier for people to walk and bike or get around on other devices throughout the city. That's discussed in a further section both on transportation, but it's also closely tied to making the neighborhood nodes and main streets more successful, and then providing a means of getting around the community that is prioritized for bikes, pedestrians, folks on other devices, such that it's safer and more convenient to get to the primary destinations. So in addition to that, this includes the LID, low impact development strategies mentioned in the SCAP, also identifying potential EV charging stations. And in this case, rather than, and I think in general for an approach from a master plan standpoint, rather than saying just, here's a goal that we have, what we'd like to do and what we're connecting here is that EV charging stations are great to have. They should be at parks and neighborhood nodes and main streets, and in the activity centers like downtown, for instance. That gives us a means of prioritizing where to put these elements. But again, most of the mobility sustainability actions are discussed in the transportation section. Then we discuss waste, municipal waste management systems in terms of tracking and reporting issues, investigating community-based recycling, where that can happen, composting, potential for composting programs as well, and also regional solutions with other communities who are interested in providing for composting and increased recycling. We discuss stormwater and sewer issues. Part of this is on low impact development and green infrastructure, especially in the northwestern areas of the city, which is where the water starts as it's flowing across the city. Looking at opportunities within parks for subsurface storage or dual use storage where it can be used as athletic fields. We did talk to Vincetta. There's the only opportunity for daylighting that we have is the historic waterway along Vincetta. That's something to consider. And then if there are other opportunities on that path that Red Run used to align with in Wagner Park, the golf club, and then how city projects can advance these practices, educational campaigns, especially with the combined sewer system, that educational campaigns can help in addressing the heavy use times when it's raining, but then also to really study what the incremental development of a separated stormwater system would be, as it's been discussed. Yes, it's a big expense, but people are getting it done, and there may be federal funds to assist with that. Then we move on to trees and plantings. This is looking at tree preservation at areas where tree canopy is lacking and looking at targeted improvements there. Education around the benefits of native landscaping and requirements associated with those. And then there's some other discussion in trees in a later section. And then lastly, on regional sustainability. So this is looking at partnerships and opportunities around the region and with SEMCOG to be able to advance the climate action plan, to be involved in SEMCOG's regional climate action plan that is ongoing and may have grants and funds available for local projects, and then supporting regional green space preservation while we can't. We don't have a lot to preserve that's not already preserved in Royal Oak. There is a need in the region. So that's sort of the breadth of the sustainability and climate action focus so far. And I'll pause to see if you have any questions or suggestions at this point. And again, we'll have the opportunity to absorb this and provide additional input at a later time too.
Commissioner Douglas.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Matt. And I understand that you've got a lot of ideas in here that are not going to wind up in the master plan, and you're looking for input or reactions to those. And you did mention this in passing, but I wanted to go back to the idea of a separate municipal stormwater system. Are there communities that do that?
Yeah, it's a requirement now. It's no longer legal to have a combined sewer and stormwater system from the EPA, but because Royal Oak system is older, it's grandfathered in, and there are places that are trying to convert from a combined system to a separated system.
With success?
I have to study it more, but that's what I've heard.
Okay, I'm interested.
Grand Rapids did it. Grand Rapids has separated theirs.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Okay, all right, thanks.
Ms. Beakey.
I was just going to briefly comment. I appreciate the attention to incorporating the sustainability and climate action plan issues into this, and it's illuminating to me to see how some of those come to life with the land use map and some of the other things that are combined here. And on the future land use map, the way it's laid out, I also appreciate seeing that, hearing from our residents and citizens that a lot of the areas are pretty much to remain as they are and kind of concentrating where development would be so that it's predictable. I appreciate that as well.
Anybody else? All right, proceed.
Great. And on that last point, we did find that was a very important issue to tackle, which is to see, do we have the capacity in the places people may generally agree along corridors, places where there's existing multifamily, places where there's other land uses, whether infill in those areas could accommodate the capacity for growth that is projected, and whether those could at the same time help to achieve the goals on housing costs, aging in community, and climate action, and we feel that they can, and so that was the approach that we took through that process. So next we look at activity centers. So we just wanted to broaden it out. It's not just downtown. There are places with a lot of intensive land uses right now, but they are most of them, I mean, basically anywhere that's not downtown is generally automobile oriented. And so the goal is to transition those areas into more pedestrian and bike friendly as well as automobile accommodating, and to enable them to transition to mixed use. Now, many probably won't for a long time, or if ever, such as even if we allow for growth within the parking lots of Kroger, is it going to happen? Maybe, maybe not, but we can allow it. But the greatest opportunities are in locations like the Delamere area, which is converting from it may be industrial, it's mostly manufacturing, but it's already on its way to housing non-manufacturing commercial uses, and that is in the process of change. So getting ahead of that and thinking about how that could provide for a main street in the area, not a downtown, not the scale of downtown, but something that is lower in scale and connected to the scale of the neighborhoods. In the charrette, we had proposed something much more intensive and got feedback that it was, too much, scale it down. So we looked at scaling that down. And then we looked at a couple of other locations, looking back to downtown. We looked at 13 and Woodward. This is related a bit to the Woodward discussion, so we'll touch back on that. But part of the Woodward discussion is to reduce the amount of commercial sprawl all up and down Woodward and really try to concentrate in locations. And the most major location is 13 and Woodward. There are a lot of large-scale activities there, but there's also Memorial Park and the sort of civic infrastructure that would support that being a mixed-use destination, which is very different from the rest of Woodward. So we looked there, and I had mentioned Grocer, but 12 Mile and Campbell, we also see that is evolving. The larger use may or may not change over time, but there are opportunities there to enable a short Main Street, such as along Campbell and Belair, and a consideration of what the future use of DPS may be in that location. Is there another location that is on less valuable property that it may be moved to? So that's something to consider. Back to downtown. In downtown, we did spend a little bit more of a focus.
I'm going to say the opposite thing, because these things do have pictures and people can't see the pictures. Sorry. If you
I was thinking of, I was bringing up the downtown
different because
one.
we have our own screens in it, so it's kind of mixed up.
Yeah. I was bringing up the downtown one for that purpose, so you got me at exactly the right time. So in downtown, and I'll say coming into to this process, coming into the charrette, we didn't have any preconceived solutions. So did I think we'd be looking at doing a more detailed downtown plan? No. But we were there and identified the fact that that there are some improvements that could be made in the downtown to increase its functioning. So we took a look at that very specifically. In part, it's in noticing something that I've known for a long time about downtown Royal Oak, which is that you sort of have one world on Washington and one world on Main, and they're not exactly connected. And while you can go between them, it's not the greatest experience everywhere. And really what you want from a pedestrian standpoint, which is how you increase the functioning of businesses in a downtown, is to create a loop. But part of that is also to look at the edges. So for example, one edge is the civic center area, and there's a lot of opportunity there to really play that up and focus on what's there without much change. Some of this is sort of a branding standpoint, and then there's the station area, and there's a lot of change that can be accommodated there. There's accessible parking. there's a parking lot that is really unnecessary, and the ability to really look towards a longer term future where more people perhaps will use Amtrak, where there's another service on that line, and it really becomes the place that you may arrive in Royal Oak, and rather than arrive to a parking lot, we think you should arrive to a great transit center on a plaza, which also frees up for redevelopment in the area that can help to pay for such changes. To the south, we know that that OCC is doing their campus work. We look at the parking lots there. In the diagram here, we show development on both, but in the description, which came later, we actually discussed it and thought that converting this location, the smaller triangle, to a public plaza would actually be a better anchor and create a center for the southern end of downtown. And then also looking at what are the characteristics of Fourth as it goes east, and it is a different place, a different character, but it does have the opportunity to help restore some of the more artistic and artisanal uses that people feel are lost in the downtown. And then we also discussed the ability to use some of the public property to both get more attainable housing within the downtown area and some of the missing uses. So for example, there's not a downtown grocery. That is an issue for the downtown growing as a mixed-use district, and Sharon's identifying other uses that would be desirable in the downtown, so that it's not just, say, restaurants and expensive stores, but can service the community better. So in that, since you had mentioned that there are some images, I'll zoom into a few. One is the parking deck next to where we held the charrette, which in the future will need to be replaced. And so because a lot of the parking capacity has been added, there's the ability to redevelop that and really make a connection on Third to the train station. Some images of what the train station plaza could look like. Those are downtown. There are some images back to Delamere, looking at the existing condition in the industrial area, or manufacturing really, and a redevelopment of that, which could include a main street that spans a number of blocks along Delamere, but behind it mainly residential development, and perhaps the opportunity with the funds we've discussed a potential additional TIF district, such as the DDA in this area, that could help pay for infrastructure improvements, and ideally also acquire these properties that are adjacent to the park, Normandy Oaks, and extend that park to meet the street. Then we also looked at here on 13 and on 13 Mile and Woodward, the redevelopment opportunities there existing here on the left. On the right, looking at the CVS site as an ideal location for a public square that's at the sort of intersection of these major roads, but really signals Royal Oak along Woodward. Right now, the downtown is off of Woodward as opposed to Ferndale and Birmingham, so Royal Oak doesn't really have a presence on Woodward, and there's the opportunity to do so, and some other infill conditions there. This is related to a later section, but I'll just mention this is looking at a smaller scale of infill on corridors. In this case, being townhomes, we also looked at multifamily at a few different scales. So I think for the activity centers, yeah, that's the gist of what we have for the activity centers. Do you have any questions, clarifications, suggestions?
Commissioner Douglas.
So in this section and elsewhere in your document, and really throughout your, your ideas as a planning firm, you talk in here about form-based zoning. And as we go forward, I think it's so important to let people know what exactly that means. And I say that because so many people that we heard in Charette say, I want Royal Oak to look like Royal Oak. And form-based zoning or form-based codes are the things that help us make our city look like people want it to look. And so I think that's going to be an important part of our education going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And in addition, when we were talking about housing affordability, there was a developer in that meeting who brought it up and said, if we use this, it's sort of better for everyone. And what form-based coding means is to focus more on the form of the building than on the use. You still address use, but today's codes start with use, and they don't really care where parking's located or how the building meets the sidewalk or how the entries to buildings are formatted, located, windows, etc. They do talk about height, but they don't talk about, say, buildings that are tall, transitioning to bring the scale down, or looking specifically at the transition between new development that's taller and existing development adjacent to it, and how that may take into account the scale adjacency. Additionally, it really looks at how to mitigate some of the concerns that people have about the character of some types of development. It was interesting to see people's feedback on townhouses, and the reality is if you get a townhouse and the parking's in the front, it doesn't work. And that's something that form-based codes care a great deal about, and use-based codes really don't address. So the use of form-based codes is helpful in terms of in those issues, but also in the fact that they illustrate what the outcomes are of expected development in a manner that is more easily accessible to the public. So you have a greater understanding of what is allowed on properties adjacent to you, or if someone is requesting a rezoning, what is allowed by the zone that they're asking to be rezoned to, and that's graphically depicted, not just text. Now, what you tend to do in these cases is you raise the bar of development quality, but that's not so bad for developers either, because at the same time, it's sort of a trade-off where you say, we're going to expect more out of you. We want really excellent high-level development, but in doing so, this ties back to making the process easier. In doing so, we're going to make it easier to get through the development review process, so you're not dealing with the uncertainty. You're not having to go through a PUD that you don't know what the outcomes are, and that is incredibly costly, and you end up with a lot of development proposals that don't proceed. And that's the tie between saying, here's where we want, here's where we think development should occur, where growth should occur, and these are the standards that we would like to have a high bar on quality for that development. And by meeting those two elements, we enable it to be easier to achieve. So it's really good for both sides.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, you may proceed.
Okay. The next section, we discuss neighborhood amenities. In the discussion on there, it's really that the neighborhoods are great. We're not in this. We're not looking to change the character of neighborhoods in Royal Oak. Rather, we're looking at some ways of better supporting the neighborhoods that deals with some circulation, reducing cut-through traffic, providing for greater tree canopy, looking at the parks, but it's also tied to neighborhood nodes and main streets, which I discussed before, but I'll get back to that here. And that is the neighborhood nodes and main streets. The edges of most neighborhoods, especially along the major roads, have a great deal of existing commercial. A lot of it's either empty or relatively dilapidated. And the goal here is to try to concentrate where that occurs towards some of the more major intersections. So we've identified those on the map, and to discourage those uses and encourage infill of townhouses, multifamily duplexes, and so forth along the corridors in between. And when retail is concentrated, then it actually functions better because there's cross shopping. When it's spread out, then it tends to lower in quality. So it's really about concentrating it to a few places. These are places that it already is today, but then additionally supporting that with traffic calming, on-street parking. These are opportunities for the EV charging stations and bike parking and bike repair stations, as discussed, to encourage the redevelopment by allowing for housing to be built, as well as businesses in these areas, to prioritize improvements for crosswalks at these locations for all the users, those on devices, on bike or on foot, and to look at that resiliency hub element that I discussed, but also specifically in zoning. Here is a place that you focus on form, but also the use to encourage neighborhood-focused uses, and we're discussing what those are with Sharon, and how to build out recommendations for what really should be in a neighborhood to enable people to get to more of their daily needs, to also socialize at a cafe, or even the opportunities for public seating, such that people have an opportunity to get their daily needs and socialize within walking or biking distance. Certainly people will still drive, but if we can make it more convenient to walk or bike, then that really advances our climate goals. In terms of parks, we also recommend analyzing parks from a neighborhood basis, which is to say, if I'm in neighborhood Y, if I'm in a neighborhood in the northeast section of the city, what do I have access to? Do I have access to a park with athletic fields nearby? Do I have access to a park with a tot lot, with a dog park? From a physical location basis to analyze the distribution of park facilities, and this came up in discussions of what sort of recreational opportunities were needed by residents of different ages, and so there was a lot of feedback in terms of what was needed for young children, for teens, for singles, for young families, for aging adults, and those should all be available within proximity to people's houses, which means looking at that from a proximity basis across the city. We don't have the opportunity to really create more large parks, but it's really about how to best utilize the parks such that they're easily accessible to people nearby for all their needs, so that the sort of life cycle in the neighborhood is fully supported from the park standpoint. And then just like the main streets and nodes, these are good opportunities for EV chargers and bike racks and repair stations. Also, trash and recycling, looking at opportunities for restrooms too. Now we listed this with schools because in terms of getting around, we were recommending revising what would have before been looked at as a bike network, which was not really complete. And we'll talk about this in transportation, but in looking at the ways in which to move around the city. Not that you can't go and walk whichever way you want, but where are we looking at improving sidewalks and tree plantings and crosswalks and diverting, making it less convenient for automobiles and more convenient for pedestrians and bikes, and that is connecting parks and schools and neighborhood main streets and nodes, so it's easier to access these without a car should you choose, but also not making it any more difficult from a car either. And then lastly, in neighborhood preservation, and this is discussing zoning from the standpoint of ensuring that the zones that are regulating development in neighborhoods are producing outcomes that are similar to what is already there, as opposed to much larger homes in adjacency to existing housing, maintaining the neighborhood characteristics like tree lawns, deep setbacks, slow streets, street parking, and consistent sidewalks, and really just generally improving crosswalks and plantings. And so we did look at those. There's some graphics for this section. One is just starting to identify parks proximity from smaller ones to larger ones. We haven't yet identified the different facility offerings, and then that's on the left. And then on the right, we were looking at what main streets and nodes might be. This first top one is really the more intensive of what we looked at for proposal, which is where Maine, Gadalpo, Crooks, and Rochester come together. It's like, I call it the center of the world, north of downtown. And that can really be a great neighborhood center with sort of civic opportunities adjacent to the cemetery. So you could do a lot there, but still keep it within a scale that's relatively compatible to those uses around. Another neighborhood Main Street opportunity at Crooks and Rochester, looking at a similar scale of buildings. And then what might be a node, which is something smaller scale that could be commercial, could just turn into multifamily. And these are at the sort of less intensive locations in the community where there's already existing commercial uses, and those are intended to provide opportunities for retail services and gathering within close proximity to where people live. So that's that section. If you have anything to discuss.
Get the labeling correct on that drawing.
Page 21, you got it mislabeled. It's Crooks and Webster.
Okay.
Any questions from the panel here? Okay, looks like other than fixing your error there, you can proceed.
Okay. The next discusses housing options. So in the beginning, we talked about areas of growth and the process of growth. So I already discussed this, but that's really about clarifying in the future land use map where growth should occur and what should be preserved, updating the zoning code to align with that, and updating the review process, and also form-based codes to ensure compatibility, especially along corridors and in these more intensified areas, but it's also something that may be useful in neighborhoods should that be desired. We look at housing types and aging in community. So along these major roads and corridors and neighborhood nodes and activity centers to enable a broader range of housing types. That means duplexes, townhomes, and multifamily, still controlling the scale of buildings and height. Here was the code again, as I mentioned, identifying sites for residential development that's out of the SCAP. So that really ties in here to the other strategies. Studying where accessory dwellings may be allowed and appropriate, perhaps developing a pilot program for that. There's certainly concerns about that we heard, and so that may be something to investigate, to pilot out, to see how it works and in what format. There's also attached ADUs, which are separate from detached ADUs, and so some places like Vermont, for example, and New Hampshire, there's much more common to allow attached versus detached, but there's a lot to study there. Incentivizing additional senior housing by leveraging public properties or providing incentives, and I did really appreciate a story that I heard about someone who was able to buy their first house because someone had been trying to get into senior housing, and the wait list is so long that it was nearly impossible, but they got an opportunity to get in, and then this person was able to move into to their house with their family and sort of keep that life cycle going. So that was really, really important. I think there's opportunities to incentivize additional senior housing beyond what may occur naturally by the private sector. We certainly want to allow it and incentivize it, but there might be some means to move that forward more quickly. So that's also the multifamily housing in places that we discussed, and in support of senior housing. And then there was a suggestion that there may be a program to look at in terms of relocation assistance for seniors above a certain age that may need assistance in response to challenging events, but also in housing relocation. Now, in terms of housing cost, we do discuss a lot of the growth pressures on Royal Oak that's related to the regional situation, and also just how great it is to live in Royal Oak. So there's a lot of demand. So naturally occurring attainable housing just isn't going to happen. So we're looking at ways to address that. One is to, as I said, make it easier to build multifamily where we can agree that it should be allowed, and to make it easy to do that. That lowers a lot of barriers and can begin to address the need for attainable housing. There is a need for, you need a housing needs assessment to determine really what the targets should be and incentive programs should be, and then provide assistance with permits, expediting processes to make it easier to get through review. So that's all on making it easier to grow and lowering the barrier. But then you could also leverage land assets in downtown, like I had discussed in the downtown plan, and those could be tied to goals for attainable and affordable housing, but those built by the private market. And then we also heard that it's possible for you all to control certain state grant funds for attainable and affordable housing and how they're used, and allocate those in coordination with community housing needs. And then a discussion on inclusionary zoning for attainable or affordable housing. The level of that, again, is you need the housing needs to really determine that. But to apply that for larger development projects, such as above 30 units, where a certain number of units at a certain rate would be required for those projects. You are getting that way. You're enabling growth, and again, a lot of it's multifamily, but in doing so, to ensure that you're beginning to meet your needs for housing attainability. So then we had just a couple of images in this section, which we looked at infill conditions along corridors. I had looked at one before, but here's another flex residential medium scale on the bottom, which is looking at infill in a currently commercial area, but of a scale that is relatively low. So this is saying what may be most compatible for infill that still meets a development pro forma, but can be compatible with adjacent neighbors. So this is sort of the lower scale of infill that we're looking at here, as discussed, best addressed by form-based code. And then here, what is the higher scale of infill goals on 11 Mile, for instance, are also like other corridors to reduce the endless spread of commercial and focus on nodes, but also to aim for infill there, but then additionally to take into account considerations of the adjacent neighbors, which is, not to put a very large new building right up against the rear property line. Those are sort of considerations that we can address when looking at these types of future land use conditions. So that's the housing section. I'll pause if you have anything to add.
Anyone? Ms. Beakey.
I'll just comment that last point about, again, the setbacks and the transition between existing properties, maybe infill, that again, the form-based code can be very helpful on that. And we look forward to, again, we talked a lot about design standards during a lot of the meetings.
All right, and thanks for the opportunity to take a sip of water. All right. Do you have another comment? Proceed. Okay. This is the last major section. So this is getting around transportation. I think I've already discussed a lot of the background for this, which is what you call mode shift, which is making it easier and more convenient for people to walk or bike. It's not making it hard to drive, just making it easier for the other modes, because the vast majority of our streets are our biggest public asset. They are have been mostly redefined for cars between the 50s and the late 90s to early 2000s, and so now it's making incremental improvements to shift that back. So we focus a lot on walking, rolling, and biking, and that is really heavily related to that Greenway network. And a Greenway network, one of the main reasons that we brought this concept up is the difficulty and the sort of lack of space in some areas on major roadways to provide for safe opportunities for biking and to make it really comfortable to walk. And while you may be able to provide, and we have looked at, you are able to provide some bike facilities on major roads, those aren't the places that families really want to bike, for instance, or people that are not aggressive bikers who didn't bike commute 35,000 miles, but just the folks who want to bike but feel but are timid because of the danger. And so that is by providing routes that are not on the major roads but are sort of parallel with them in the neighborhood at a slow speed where there's not much traffic, tying that to improvements to crosswalks in those areas and to diverters and other means of making it less convenient for cars to take a route that we may be, say, aligning all the stop signs so it's easier to bike without stopping. Well, then it's easier to drive. So there are diverters that you use so that it's not easy to drive all the way through, but it's easy to bike. And again, in terms of crossings, there's crossings in the neighborhood, but especially at the major roads, and it's tying this network to more frequent crossings of major roads for pedestrians and bikes, so it's safer and more convenient to get around that way. So there's more detail that we talk about in there about countdown timers and so forth. But we also, as I mentioned, that was tied to parks and schools as well as the main streets and activity centers. But doing that with schools is advancing goals around safe routes to school. I know there's a focus on that. It's also as I've already discussed the greenhouse gas emissions. It's also advancing public health, and then looking to advance goals around Vision Zero. Vision Zero is a transportation because essentially a goal. I don't know it's so much of a program, but it's a goal to reduce deaths from vehicular transportation, of which there's over 30,000 people a year who are killed in car crashes, and a lot of that is hard to achieve in areas that are heavily car dominant, and there's quite a lot of danger with fast moving vehicles and slower moving pedestrians or cyclists. So it's really looking at balancing that, making crossings safer and slowing down vehicles to achieve that. So we have specific recommendations in here about what changes should be pursued along major roads, what changes should be pursued at uncontrolled crosswalks. That's, without stop signs and without too much indication today, but opportunities for flashing beacons or highly visible crosswalk signs, refuge islands in the middle, just making it safer to cross. Recommendations at signalized intersections, a series of accessibility recommendations, and then at other sidewalks in general, and then recommendations around the Greenway network. But again, altogether, this is really about making it safer to bike and walk, also safer to drive, because driving at a slower speed is safer for everyone. But not, say, reducing the potential volume of traffic. So there's a lot of recommendations here. Part of the Greenway network concept, which we do have on a map. So I'll pull that up. A part of the Greenway network concept is also about prioritization. So that's to say, today, where do we think we should prioritize new crosswalks or crosswalk improvements? Well, this network gives you the opportunity to say, well, here are a number of places that the network crosses, say 12 Mile here at Vincetta, or or here at Main and Webster. These are places that need safety improvements. So this allows for prioritization of those sorts of programs, but it's also not a high cost in terms of achieving this type of network, because you don't have to build major infrastructure. It's really a lot about signage, painting of sharrows, and some minor improvements. It's not like a street reconstruction project is necessary to accommodate any of this. So I'm just going to get back to my place. Okay, so we did address right sizing streets. The city's been already doing conversions from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. We asked Jacobs, our transportation engineer consultants, to take a look at the existing streets, how many lanes they have, what their traffic is today, and whether or not they can have a 4 to 3 lane reduction and still accommodate the traffic volume that they have today. So they looked at that and also provided a little bit of background on why these sorts of conversions are increasing safety and are not an issue for emergency vehicles or anything else, which have the requirements. So you still meet all those standards, and also some ways that those activities can contribute towards better sidewalk opportunities or tree planting opportunities or on-street parking, and from the on-street parking, really where that should be prioritized. So we went through that. It's I don't think we haven't mapped, say, priorities. It's something we could consider, but we did want to evaluate because we know there's been some pushback, and so we evaluated whether or not those programs were justified, and they were, and there's additional opportunities for that going forward that'll improve public safety. The next section looks at Woodward. And so there's a few things going on with Woodward, and we started with a discussion of how to, of whether or not there should be a road reduction of travel lanes. And then we began to discuss the character of commercial development along Woodward, the significant amount of vacancy, difficulty of providing parking, and we heard from residents about parking spillover and the sort of scale and adjacency of growth and traffic through neighborhoods. And so we were looking at opportunities that may be able to address all of that. And we've looked at Woodward in Birmingham for the master plan that we worked on there, and had one approach, but in sort of discussing the conditions here, and it's very different from the condition there. We thought that a solution, which we shared the proposal of, that a solution along these lines would function particularly well for Royal Oak. And so what we're showing here is technically a lane reduction. These buildings here, this red, let me annotate. These buildings here are these buildings here. Okay, so plan and perspective. So right now, this is all within the MDOT right of way. We've measured everything out, and by doing a single lane reduction on the main portion of Woodward, which we did ask Jacob to look at, and they looked at the traffic counts and the future projections for I-75 opening back up, and also discussed with adjacent municipalities that have studied the same thing, and that can be accommodated without an impact to traffic in the future. And so what we looked at here was on the sides where you have currently you have the dangerous parking, angled parking up here that you kind of pull off the road towards. We took all that space, which again is MDOT space, provided for a small median between these travel lanes and what we call a slip lane, or some people called it a frontage road. I mean, I associate frontage roads with like freeways, but this slip lane has a slow moving travel lane in one direction, on-street parking, and we also have a sort of two-way bike facility. This is along with the cars, which are going slow, and this one is called a contraflow lane, so you can go in two ways. And we also found that depending upon where you locate these, here on the right is one example, basically where Vincent is intersecting Woodward, but how you might get into the slip lane as a vehicle and continue along it, but you wouldn't get in and out everywhere. And essentially what that means is that most of the neighborhood side streets would be protected from fast-moving traffic coming directly. And then we also discussed the concentration of the larger scale commercial uses at just a few locations, and to instead encourage the redevelopment of these properties to be principally residential, which has a lower parking demand and can address some of the housing needs. And I wouldn't suggest that if we didn't at the same time have the ability to add, say, 2 lanes of trees before you got to residential units between Woodward and the potential future housing. So there's a lot of complicated detail around it, but we thought that was that seemed to be a really interesting solution that I think is unique and recognizes the fact that Royal Oak has a particular character all along Woodward, and both by concentrating at 13 Mile, sort of what appears to be a gateway square related to Memorial Park and development around there, and a few other nodes, but in between, reducing the amount of commercial would really change the character along Woodward. There's also discussions about how to beautify the median and some thoughts about the potential for a regional multimodal trail in the middle. Now there is going to be a new process for Woodward going forward, sort of like the previous multimodal plan, but sort of renewed. And so that's an opportunity to explore a lot of these concepts going forward. So next we heard some concern around growth in Delamere. Would that be able to be accommodated by existing roadways? So we discussed that. I asked Jacobs to look at that, and they found that it could be accommodated, but did point out that the 14-mile and Coolidge intersection that jogs would likely get a little bit worse, and so they looked at some opportunities that we might be able to pursue in order to fix that. One being the modification of the existing rail bridge to get rid of the middle supports, which adds I think 16 turning lanes, 8 in each direction. Or we also looked at some opportunities from land that is potentially under redevelopment in the future to redirect in a new location, which again, those sorts of things can apply for federal funding, such that you don't have to do the jog, but have a more direct connection. So there's a look at that, and then finally, in terms of transit, looking at how the millage will be used, improving bus stops and shelters and accessible waiting areas where those should really be prioritized, activity centers, neighborhood main streets, and nodes. And then looking at efficiencies within the existing public transportation network, and also opportunities for access to multimodal options for senior housing. We didn't discuss in here circulators. It's been something that I have been discussing lately, and maybe a consideration, which is there may be ways to encourage to either develop or encourage from the private sector some smaller scale vehicles for internal circulation as an alternative to transit. So we haven't really explored that side of things, but we're happy to look into that and provide recommendations if desired. So that is the conclusion of that section and of the summary.
All right. Comments, questions for our planners? Commissioner Douglas.
Yeah, Matt, the idea of slip lanes on Woodward is very intriguing. Have you seen that elsewhere?
Yeah, I can't off the top of my head think of where it is, but we've used them in some projects, principally when we're up against like a big arterial that you can't put. Viable businesses don't really work on them either, which kind of leads you to where things are right now. But we have built those just right off of it, and you got much slower traffic, and it's perfectly pleasant to be on the sidewalk there as opposed to today where it's not.
It's intriguing that we've always conceived of Woodward. It's zoned right now general business. This is the place, this is the main road highway where we would put big stuff, car dealerships and so forth. And yet your concept is to scale that down so that the neighborhood residents would have some lower scale residential on Woodward instead of the potential for, major commercial developments. So I think that's very intriguing.
Other comments, questions for DPZ? All right. Very good. Do you have any questions for us, Matt?
Well, I think as Joseph brought up. What we'll look to do is there's a lot in here. I'm sure as you go through it in more detail that you'll have additional feedback, and we'll look to get that additional feedback here in the near future. Ideally written. We can also discuss that at a future meeting. I'll also note that in terms of public comment on this document, that is folks can go to planroyaloak.com and submit comments there. And again, once we make any recommended revisions from the Planning Commission, we will continue with another public survey so that we can get a much broader audience with the public and their input on this direction before we take the steps towards drafting the first draft of the master plan.
All right, I think if you stick around, you're going to get some public comment tonight. So what's the next step here, folks? Are we ready to move into the public comment section, or does the commissioners have any other comments? All right, seeing none, I think that we'll just jump right into it. So if we have people in the audience who'd like to come up and comment, please do so. Remember, you have 3 minutes. Right here, come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Casada. Hard to read this entire document in just a few days, so I'm glad this is maybe going to be another opportunity to look into this or make more comments in the future. And it's a document intended to give some direction, but I'm intrigued by one word that appeared under the aligning the policy section, and it was the word distrust. That's a word that came up during some of the meetings and the charrettes. I disagree with the analysis of what creates that distrust in the document. So some claim that there's a relationship between the desires of the elected officials and the approvals of projects using a PUD process, which is basically open the door for a free-for-all, ignore the rule of law. The distrust is really generated by repetitively, in particular in front of the city commission, whether it's a rezoning or whatever, when large numbers of residents show up and object to the content, the quality, the type of project that's being proposed. I don't see how this trust is going to be diminished by making it easier for the types of projects that people object to be streamlined, expedited, and easier to approve. I think it's going to expand the distrust, and especially when you start getting into this form-based zoning and a lot of discretionary language that would have to accompany that and other items in this preliminary document. There has to be some trust between the residents, the property owners, and their elected officials, and it's lacking right now, greatly lacking. We heard some reasons for distrust already tonight. The lack of notice and people really knowing what's going on. The people in the neighborhoods in these affected areas don't know what's going on. Very few people do. The methodology you use with surveys and giving notice of these meetings is insufficient, and it just doesn't work. There needs to be different methods used to reach the public and let them know what's going on. The surveys, I don't know, but that's not a method that was used 20 years ago with the old master plan process. There needs to be trust created by this planning commission with better notice and information, and there has to be a cure for people who are afraid to come to these meetings because of the assaults, the harassment, and the crap that Razor conducted after being appointed by the Planning Commission or Mayor Fournier, or I don't know how it happened. It didn't happen at a public meeting. That's a violation of an Open Meetings Act. I examined the record. I couldn't find it. You need to work on building trust. You don't have it now. You need to have that to have buy-in from the community and make these plans work.
All right, thank you. I saw this hand up right there next. Yep, you.
Make it stop.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to keep this brief and pertinent. My name is Andy. I live in Woodward Side. If you're familiar with the infamous Starbucks on Coolidge and Woodward, I live in the house that's probably closest to it. I'm going to speak for myself and my significant other who I live with. I couldn't help but notice the high-scale residential proposed development right alongside Woodward, where there are currently businesses now, including the CVS that was mentioned. Given the choice between living next to that Starbucks and an apartment building, we would honestly choose the Starbucks. We don't relish the idea of somebody in a potential 4-story apartment building being able to look into our backyard and into our house at all hours of the day and night and determine whether we're home or not. At night, the Starbucks shuts down, everybody goes home, and we don't have lots of random people wandering through our neighborhood. Yes, it's loud, yes, it's annoying, but we've learned to live with it. I've been there about 9 years now. And that also begs the question with these new residential developments alongside Woodward, how are they who's going to want to live with all of the noise that's already there that is now going to be more concentrated with a lane diet on Woodward? The muscle cars, the crotch rockets, the Harley Davidsons, and the classic cars aren't going away. I don't know if anyone else happens to know this, but between late February and December, me and my significant other refer to it as vroom season. People go drag racing off of that turnaround light that's right at the end of my street. I don't understand how this is going to somehow reduce the noise and the traffic and the congestion with a lane diet. That's really all I had to say, so.
All right, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman Casada. My name is Tom Halleck. I'm a former city commissioner. I spent 13 years on the Planning Commission. And I would like to talk about a complete lack of transparency of the process so far. If you go on the city website right now and look at the front page, there is nothing about this meeting. No documents, nothing. Why are you hiding this? Why is this so hard to find? You have to know exactly where to go on the city website to find Plan Royal Oak. There's nothing on the front. This is the biggest thing that's happened in Royal Oak in decades. It should be on the front page every single day with the links to the documents, and there is nothing. You're hiding the process. And the only reason that you'd want to hide the process is you're afraid that people aren't going to like it, or somebody's being lazy, one or the other. I find it interesting that the opening phrase on this master plan is that it says, overall, Royal Oak doesn't need significant change. And then it goes and changes everything in the city. And if you think it doesn't, you're not being honest. It changes large areas into 3-story and 4-story multifamily. It changes all the single family into low scale and medium scale residential. Well, when it's not single family, that means you bring in form zoning. And form zoning sounds wonderful. It'll look nice and all that. But it also allows you to shove in duplexes, triplexes, townhouses, ADUs, small apartments, and commercial into a neighborhood, single-family neighborhood, as long as it looks like a house. But it's not a neighborhood anymore. You just killed off a single-family neighborhood, and you doubled and tripled the population. That's not acceptable. And these wholesale changes met with wide disapproval at both the meetings in January and in the charrettes by a heavy margin. Enough so that Commissioner Douglas demanded that they go out and find other people to talk to. Well, you got your results. The results were, we don't want this tearing up our single-family neighborhoods and shoving all kinds of stuff into it. But you seem determined to do so. And if you think shoving some duplexes and triplexes into a neighborhood doesn't change the neighborhood, you're off in space someplace. So please consider the fact that most people have invested their life savings into a single-family neighborhood on purpose and did not ask for you to change it to something else. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I have a hand right there in the blue shirt.
Hello, thanks for having me. My name's Carlton Brown. I'm a 26-year resident of Royal Oak. I'm currently in Woodward Side, the neighborhood next to Woodward and 13 Mile. I'm the Woodward Side Improvement Association president. I just wanted to focus in on our neighborhood. We love our neighborhood. We moved to our neighborhood because we love it. And we want to just make sure that whatever changes are considered, it's about respecting existing neighbors. I like the topics that came verbally through about outcomes similar to what we already have, consistency, but when I read through the documents, I saw a lot of differences. Reading through neighborhood medium scale, it talks about houses that are right against the sidewalks, complete change to single family. I really think that people love the neighborhood and moved here because of the way it is today, and should be zoned as they are today after we get through all this. We had a theme of preserve, maintain, and enhance the character of existing neighborhoods with the old master plan. That's a theme that we love, and we like to keep it. Just about building heights in this theme of this large-scale type housing next to 13 Mile Woodward by our neighborhood. You know, the Planning Commission, was it about a year and a half ago, you rejected the 56-foot tall buildings. That's basically what this is proposing again, to go back to 4 stories. We're concerned about that shading neighbors, invading privacy, and also the number of occupants bringing parking concerns. I know that there's a grand vision that in the future we won't drive cars. They'll just show up and pick us up, but that could be quite some time in the future, 20, 30 years perhaps. So let's make sure that there are enough parking spots if this is pursued so that residents, guests, maintenance workers, EV charging can all be accommodated and cars don't have to infiltrate the neighborhood streets as they have done on 13 Mile by the apartments today. Yeah, outcomes similar to what we already have. Sounds great. Please update the wording to reflect that. Preserve and maintain and enhance the character of our existing neighborhoods. That's what we want. Thanks a lot for your time.
All right, thank you. Right here.
Good evening. My name is Mike Lineweber. I've been a Royal Oak resident for, well, since 1999. And the prior speaker actually touched on several points that I would concur with, namely, to get into specifics, the flex residential high scale is got too much density, 4 stories. The renderings themselves show 2 stories, and that kind of a density would be something that would be of interest, certainly better than the closed down commercial buildings, but a 4-story building that's looking over existing residential homes is really going to be quite intrusive. Parking is also an important aspect of that. Finding the cars that we wish weren't there, but they will be, for a 4-story building is an important element. And if that's not allowed for, then they will be pouring into the streets nearby, to the detriment of the existing neighborhood. In the narrative, it does say that the parking should be determined by the developers themselves and not by ordinance. While in the development world, I do understand that. I do think that the city's got to play a role in providing some guidelines on parking. Otherwise, you will see those cars spilling into the neighborhoods, and then you wind up with the conflict of having permits and et cetera for residences, which just means that there's a problem there that needed to be addressed earlier on. Lastly, I'd like to say that with form-based codes, it's referenced several times. I'm a big proponent of its use. It's a great approach to deal with proactive planning and guidance for development. It will necessitate a complete rethinking of how the city and the planning department does business. It's not just for a development of a master plan, but going forward into the future. So it's vitally important for the success of the plan, of this plan, as in whatever form it takes, as well as for the city, that it's done right. There are some great resources for those, Smart Growth America and form-based codes, which are online. Terrific resources for people to do their own research on it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Mr. Harrison.
Thank you. Bill Harrison, 82-year resident of Royal Oak. The master plan draft summary says, overall, Royal Oak doesn't need sufficient change. Rather, it needs a lot of little changes over time that will be transformative altogether. This is an understatement. The document is replete with references to rezoning and changing from traditional zoning to form-based zoning. Major development changes are proposed, such as the narrowing of Woodward Corridor and replacing existing businesses with multi-story residential units which will encroach on my neighborhood. I live 1 block east of Woodward between Webster and 13 Mile. We were told that dimensionally it works. I'd like to see the dimensional analysis. And the parking that's shown behind these buildings, it's never going to accommodate the number of parking spaces necessary for that high-rise residential. It's a cartoon. Building multifamily housing on downtown surface parking lots. This will negatively impact downtown business, since many people will not park in parking structures. When I was on the DDA, I was responsible for purchasing that the Frizzard Bump Shop, which was formerly at 6th and Main Street, and we just have to retain that surface parking. The gray areas shown on the land use map are no longer described as single-family zoned areas. The purple nodes appear to be a precursor to creating the 15-minute city that is promoted by Klaus Schwab, a devout communist. You continue to push auxiliary dwelling units, which will devastate single-family neighborhoods. And as I go around and talk to my neighbors, they're dumbfounded by the fact that we're not going to get an opportunity to vote on this master plan. It's just something that's going to be shoved down our throat. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Way in the back there.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Duffy. I am a 10-year homeowner and before that 5-year renter of Royal Oak. I live in the Catalpa Park neighborhood at about 11 in Woodward behind the YMCA. Thank you for your thoughtful summary document. I appreciate the careful attention in the proposed future land use framework to balance preserving our historic neighborhood character while suggesting nodes and corridors that could support mixed-use redevelopment to benefit neighbors while also providing options for more attainable housing units to support aging in community and climate action. As this approach is refined, I would consider more nuance within the neighborhood medium-scale place type. The areas that are closest to downtown, including my neighborhood, have form differences that are less prevalent in the outlying neighborhoods. I support the recommendation to explore future form-based zoning to help achieve the goals of the master plan to help preserve the walkable character of the near downtown neighborhoods. Instead of new houses built to the limits of the setbacks and height, they could fit better into the neighborhood by implementing floor area ratios to help ease some of the negative impacts of infill housing maxing out the building envelope. The city of Northville is a good example to consider for that approach. I would encourage not permitting front-loaded attached garages and require front porches in these inner ring neighborhoods to preserve the walkable character. My neighborhood has many gentle-density historic duplexes and garden-style apartments, including 3-story apartments across the street from my house on Farnham. When my garage door was faulty and frequently bounced up, I was thankful for the apartment dwellers providing eyes on the street, and nothing was ever touched in my garage. They are respectful, and they even beat me to calling DTE when we have a down power line. Our neighborhood would benefit by permitting accessory dwelling units, especially for corner lots like mine that have easier rear yard access, as a means to accommodate multi-generational households and provide a source of income for homeowners. Our neighborhood was originally built with a variety of housing types and would benefit from allowing different types, provided they meet the form characteristics of the neighborhood. Page 24 mentions inclusionary zoning, which isn't enabled in Michigan yet, so I would clarify that paragraph to tie inclusionary requirements to city-owned sites or PUDs as an incentive. For flex residential, both high and medium scale, I would be clearer on where the occasional small-scale commercial would be permitted, perhaps only fronting major corridors and maintaining residential only on side streets. I would like to see more about the cost benefit of daylighting the Red Run. Would there be significant benefits to stormwater management? I expect this may be a costly endeavor, and while I would love to see a natural water body within Royal Oak city limits, this may not have the benefits that its significant cost would provide, and I would appreciate more explanation of how stormwater management would benefit from daylighting. On the neighborhood greenway map, I would be clearer in the non-motorized classifications in what is existing versus proposed and different types of facilities. What are the proposed cross-sections? What are dedicated bike lanes? Which should be separated bikeways? There are a number of connections identified in the recent Ferndale and Madison Heights plans that are missing. Please
All right, thank you.
look at those inner city connections with arrows and show them in the same connections that are shown in Berkeley. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, who's next? How about over here?
Hello. I would just like to say that I am generally in support of this document. It provides a lot of great ideas for how we can improve the housing limitations and types of housing so that we can continue to be a city that will allow many different types of people from different backgrounds and different incomes to enjoy the amenities that we have here. I'm disappointed that so many of my fellow residents feel that their backyard sunlight or the potential for seeing more people in their neighborhoods is a reason to disallow these people to enjoy this city. I have provided more detailed comments for this particular document within the comment section of the website, but I just wanted to make sure that you didn't only hear that people hate every single form of change that people are suggesting. Thank you.
Do you want to put your name on the record?
Sure. Dan Walker, not particularly special, just a resident.
Okay, thank you. All right, who's next? Back there in the black shirt.
Hello, Janice Wagman. There are a lot of things that I like about this plan, and especially incentivizing senior housing and needs assessments. But I'm going to focus on two things that I have a lot of questions about and comments. First of all, housing. The data from SEMCOG and the state says that the state of Michigan is losing population and is the 4th worst in the nation. SEMCOG data reports that Royal Oak has an 8% residential vacancy rate, or 2,228 units. It's on their website in 2021. SEMCOG's data predicts an increase of a little over 2,000 people over the next 20 years in Royal Oak. It's 2,000 over 20 years, meaning a demand for only 55 more units per year, less than what's in the report. Given this data, should the master plan open up all of these corridors that are outlined for 3 and 4 story medium and high density flex housing that will surely have an impact on residential neighborhoods that abut them, as well as our infrastructure? And is it necessary for some single-family neighborhoods to now accommodate duplexes, townhouses, and higher density housing, or will both of these just result in an increase in the number of vacancies? We need some data on this. Affordability. Data shows in cities where the elimination of all single-family zoning has been implemented, there have been very few affordable housing units added. So how are we going to accomplish this? Transportation. Do we have Royal Oak data? We've already cut some of the streets from 4 lanes to 3, added bike lanes in some. But do we have any Royal Oak data regarding the impact of that, the lane conversions? Do we have before and after car accident counts that takes into account the 11% increase in people who now work at home and aren't on the roads? Same for pedestrians and especially biking. We hire firms to do traffic studies, but to my knowledge, we have no study before and after of the number of people who were using bikes before and are now using bikes as a result of having implemented these new bike lanes. There's machines out there that will do it, and I think we should be implementing that so we have some feedback before we proceed with any more. Public transportation, actual ridership data from SMART. We need that. The data I have shows very little usage, and a decreasing number are using it for work. Before sending out another survey to continue on with this process, I'd like the residents to have this data and the planners to have this data, plus examples of other U.S. cities similar in size and population to Royal Oak, where implementing many of the things that are suggested in this proposal have achieved the goals outlined. Give us the data. Let us decide if the proposed cost-benefit of these changes are justified. Thank you.
Who's next? I see another black shirt back there, but can't see the person. Oh, there you go.
Good evening, Laura Harrison. 20 years ago, I was sitting in the old room when we were working on the master plan. It was a grueling, existing process. Anyhow, I live a block off of Woodward with the other guy. The other guy on this side is my neighbor across the street. Woodward side is very concerned about what's going to happen in our area. We love our houses. We want them. Actually, it's very peaceful in our neighborhood, and we like it. And when we came to the Charlotte, whatever you call it, about Woodward, we did not get a chance to talk about how we feel about it because it was interrupted. Most of the people in my neighborhood would like to see Woodward look like Woodward looks like in Pleasant Ridge or in Birmingham. We want, it's a terrible appearance in the middle of Woodward. There's no trees, there's nothing appealing. It's desolate, looks terrible. That's what my neighbors are more concerned about, is the look of Woodward. We want a green belt. Just like we don't have to have buildings in every foot of Woodward Avenue. Woodward in Royal Oak can be a green belt. They had 2 speakers come. One was from Ferndale and the other one was from Birmingham. And they talked about Woodward, blah, blah, blah. But Woodward, their downtowns are on Woodward. It's split by Woodward Avenue. Both cities, both Birmingham and Ferndale. Their downtowns are down there. Ours isn't. We should be able to have a nice, quiet area along Woodward. We don't have to build on every square foot. You know, leave it alone. It's a good, I mean, if you want to see improvement of Woodward, go downtown in Detroit.
All right, thank you. All right. You got anybody there? Over here.
Chris Meister again on Vincetta, and I realize that this isn't the first draft, it's only direction, but some direction that I think would be very helpful for building trust with the residents of the city is to be more transparent with this document. I mean, we've got terms like neighborhood low scale and neighborhood medium scale. What do those even mean? You know, how about having a document where you can have apples and apples comparisons about what we're talking about? You know, it's saying, you know, this is an area that's single family zoned and we're going to change it to multifamily zone. Be honest, tell us this, or whatever the change is, so that the people can make, you know, have an informed understanding of what their city government is doing here with the community that they moved into because they liked it the way it was. And I realize that, you know, we're going to be cast as people who are averse to change. No, we understand change. We embrace change. But it's got to be change that's sane, and it's got to make sense, and it's got to grow organically. You can't just wish it. And when you do things like take the large businesses off of Woodward and put small businesses there, well, those small businesses come from someplace. You know, are you going to find out that the downtown areas become abandoned because those businesses have moved? I mean, all these things there's causes and effect that somehow it seems like city government just doesn't understand, you know, something that teachers try to, you know, explain to kids in grade school. You know, what they do have consequences. And, you know, this is something that needs to be looked at. And I really don't understand why there is a need to change the master plan. Amend it, make it, you know, if there's changes need to be done, fine. If there's areas, fine. But let's make it clear what we're talking about, and also how much it's going to cost and how much it's going to change our lives. You know, it's like, okay, we want to do traffic calming. Okay, you know, how long is it going to take for an emergency vehicle to get down a street once we make these changes? These are things we should understand, and we should be looking at this with our eyes open. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Right over here.
Mike Thompson, 1210 Irving, Lawson Park homeowners. Thank you, Commissioner or Chairman Casada, Planning Commissioners, Consultant Lambert, City Planners. This 2012 master plan has served the city well. It's my 3 minutes is going to focus on single-family neighborhoods and the DPZ report that we just received this week. 2012 Great Master Plan: preserve, maintain, enhance the character of existing neighborhoods. This is objective number 1. It's on page 10. So, you know, what happened? Why wasn't this the original objective? Instead, as soon as the master plan starts, the objective is preservation and redevelopment of established neighborhoods. The new goal. I don't know where the redevelopment came from, but we're not a sprawling suburb. We're completely built out. We're 100 years old. So, over 100 years. So, what was the failure of the 2012? It should have been amended. It shouldn't be rewritten. So, city leadership, in my opinion, has predetermined the outcome of this master plan by coming out of the gate with the redevelopment. So far, the roundtables, the surveys, there's strong support to preserve single-family neighborhoods. The March 3rd report talks about areas of focus, neighborhood preservation, character, scale. It says Royal Oak is a wonderful place that does not need to be reinvented. This is from DPZ. It's to date, there's strong resistance to densification of single-family neighborhoods. DPZ said there is a perceived, predetermined recommendation for multifamily housing that encroaches into single-family housing. So it's not really perceived, it is predetermined. That the results of the surveys say that people that have houses here don't want their neighborhoods densified. So what we just got this week is how did we arrive at changing single-family residential to neighborhood medium scale? Neighborhood medium scale. So that's what my neighborhood is going to turn into. It's going to turn in from a single-family residential with limited lot coverage, setbacks, density. It's going to suddenly blow the lid off of that. So it's going to invite all kinds of new things, detached buildings next to the sidewalk, duplex, small multifamily buildings. This is not the community. This is not what we want. This is not what the original plan was, which was preserve, maintain, and enhance the character of existing neighborhoods. So the consultant, I hope you take notice, and the commissioners and everyone else, that let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Thank you.
Right there, in the white shirt.
Phyllis Salter, North Lafayette. Okay, despite that was stated, the overhaul Royal Oak doesn't need significant change. Somehow it's difficult to see how that translates into the plan. I've been driving around this city for at least 35 years, and I thought I knew everything. Recently, I had the opportunity of seeing it more close up. I saw the eastern area from 10 Mile to the northern border. I was so impressed with the amount of updating of existing homes, including exterior porches, materials, painting, siding. The landscaping was absolutely incredible, done by the owners. It looks professional. I can't imagine what that cost for them, but that was important to them. I also saw close up the area west of downtown, east of Woodward. This area is full of character. It reminds me of a Norman Rockwell painting. I'm sure a lot of us are old enough to know who that was. With varied housing structures and friendly residents. Take a look at the layout of this plan. These Royal Oak residents have put so much into their homes, physically, emotionally, and will be financially due to the loss created by its new surroundings. And this form base thing, I believe it said that calls for more character. Well, we've been trying to save our character for a long time now. So that's kind of nonsense. So this plan would take everything away of these people that we're talking about. Why wouldn't the western area of Vincetta also be up for grabs? We don't need to emulate Manhattan. Unlike the plan, we don't have a hard time getting around town. The parking would be unbelievably impossible for our streets. We are already experiencing less parking available on our streets. No, not a high use of bicycling will be on our main roads, as they are not now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right here in the front.
Hello, Commission. My name is Wade Sutton, and part of this is new to me, getting involved in local planning. And one of the reasons that inspired me was going to the charrettes, and I felt really dismissed. I also live near Woodward, and there were some concerns about some development that we brought forward to our local community, and we felt really dismissed. As I listened to the consultants sharing their perspectives, it sounded really good. We want high quality, affordable, low cost. We want high density and reduced lanes. It sounds like a silly case study where they come in and they're like, we're going to have highest quality, high innovation, and be the lowest cost. And it sells really well. But in application, the realities really get constricted. And so as we look at this from a taxation perspective, when we look at the millages, when we look at the density, having to live here is part of that quality of life. And some of those road diets directly impact a commute time. And that would be a constraint. So as we look at this, the ideas of being socially and being environmentally responsible, those are really important. And sometimes they get lost in reality. I live on the north side of Woodward, and my wife's pharmacy is on the south side of Woodward. And in the middle, 9 months out of the year when there's snow on the ground and it's raining, and that's Michigan, and we love our weather and our seasons, but I find it hard to believe that she is ever going to look at a bus schedule or ride her bike across town. She's still going to need a car. So until those machines lift us up and transport us everywhere, there is some constraints in reality. So as we look at those conflicts, I would hope that the committee will also consider those as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, who else do we have over here?
Nancy Poprowski, thank you for letting me speak. From the Royal Oak Public Library Document Center, Royal Oaks Nature Preserves, Ten of Woods, and Cummingston Park. Royal Oaks Cummingston Park Nature Preserve is considered a natural jewel of Royal Oak and surrounding communities. Heavily wooded trails, contains hundreds of species of flora, open to the public. I don't know if dogs are still allowed there. I know they said at one time they disturbed the wildlife. When the development of an apartment complex south of Park and Meyer Drive was built in the 70s, excess water from the park had nowhere to go. This caused a good portion of the park to flood from March to July every year, and this in turn reduced tree growth and killed off saplings and initiated decline of wildflowers. And in 75, 3,500 rare red trillium were counted, and in 1999, only 50 were counted. At one time, Michigan State Botany Department called this park the richest 25 to 30 acre wild area in Michigan. It also states several future generations will need to stay on top of protecting the preserves. The idea of bringing a new, revitalized urban feel, Delamere, Main Street, must proceed with caution. A real environmental expert, not a developer with ideas of roof gardens for green space, should research this. Disturbing Cummingston Park with too much traffic volume, bikes and human included, can cause the already compromised park to fail. Flooding the park is not an only issue. Using the wrong lighting around the park, it has been proven, can alienate all natural wildlife from having safe spaces. More activity with busy shops and restaurants will take away quiet, tranquil spaces and cause more noise pollution. Wildlife need private preserves to thrive. Some people don't understand why they're showing up under our decks, porches, and on our roofs and open garages. If their quiet areas are gone or disturbed, they naturally seek out new ones. With climate change already destroying portions of the earth, I think it's now or never to keep our preserves intact. And like the master plan says constantly, we need less gas emissions. Keep the green space and add to it, science proves it's the best fix. And to the gentleman about not needing sunlight, where do you get your groceries? I mean, how do you get your food? And a lot of people in Royal Oak have backyard gardens that don't want 4-story buildings damaging their sunlight for their gardens. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. Who else would like to speak here? We've had quite a few, but I'm just scanning the audience here to see if there's any hands going up. If everybody who wanted to speak has spoken, I will say going once, going twice. All right, I'm going to close the public comment at this point. Is Matt still there? I see his picture is up there, but I don't know if he is there.
He is.
Yeah, I didn't go anywhere.
The Richard and Cable Channel chance to bring him up on the screen.
That's not Matt.
Oh, that looks like Gary.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so there you have a lot of, whoop, we lost him again there.
He's there.
Oh, there you are. Okay, so you got some feedback there, and you know, I will say it is a lot to digest. I have to say I haven't digested it myself. I intend to do so, and we're going to have a couple of avenues to give you feedback, both on the website, and then we'll have to come up with the next interaction, and I don't know when that is. Do we have a plan for that? I'm sort of looking at you too, or Joe.
Sure, we'll continue the conversation next month. We'll work with Matt to figure out exactly what that means. In the meantime, we'd encourage everybody to read through the document, collect all your individual and specific comments that you want to pass on.
All right. Any comments from the commissioners, the department, council, before we move to an adjournment? I know you look like you want to say something.
My wife told me not to talk, but I probably should anyways.
Mr. Ellison.
This is going to come from the voice of experience. I went through this like Laura said. Laura and I were on the commission together when we did this. The last big master plan we did was back in the early 90s, mid 90s or something. And it was an ugly, ugly process. And that's one of the reasons I didn't want to do this. But we got through it. It wasn't a real popular plan. There were a lot of people that didn't like it, and a lot of people that did like it, but it was the master plan that we moved forward with. It's basically the same master plan that you guys don't want to change tonight. Now, over the years, we are required by state law to do our master plan. Was it 20 years, Tim? Every 20 years, we have got to do a full-blown master plan. Start from the beginning and do it again. In the intervening years, usually we try to do it like every 5 years or so, I think. we do an update. We try to catch things in the existing master plan that weren't working, so we try to fix it. Now, I think that's maybe, Mike, that's what you're talking about back in 12. We've cut some stuff and changed. But it's always a constantly evolving process. But we're 20 years out of it now, and this plan we're putting together now, before we start implementing a lot of these things, we're going to be 20 years out from this. It's still working on it. It's a constantly evolving process. It's a plan. It's not a master set in stone. You've got to start someplace. You got to put ideas down. You've got to get people to say, yeah, I like it. No, I don't like it. Because I know you've got a lot of you folks have a lot of problems with things in this master plan draft we've got. But there's a lot of people that I've talked to that don't. They like it. So, you know, it's getting the balance. As Chuck pointed out earlier, we got to stop being enemies. We got to figure out a way to work together for our community. And, it's got to start with the quit telling everybody that you can't trust them. And somehow we got to work through the trust. Tom, you and I worked together on a 20-year ago master plan. And it was a tough, head-butting situation, but we got through it, and we established a plan, and the Royal Oak you see today is a big result of the work we did back then. An imperfect plan that the city accepted and followed. And this is going to be the same process. This is first draft. We're going to go through a bunch of other drafts, and there's going to be things that are going to be added, things that are going to be deleted. But remember, this is not the city reaching into a pocket of money and saying, we're going to build this. We put the ideas out there, try to interest some developers in building some of these projects that we put in our master plan. It's private money. It's not the city. It's city facilitating the opportunity to bring development in. And that's what we're doing. We're not doing it. We're not bad guys or good guys. We're just creating an environment where our city can thrive, which is always what we try to do. It's in my 16 years as mayor, or 13 years as mayor, it was always trying to keep Royal Oak relevant. We always got to keep us on the front forefront. People want to be here, and it's still playing out. It's a popular suburb. It's a popular place to be. So it doesn't behoove anybody to trash the future progress of our city. We're not doing this master plan for us. I'm not going to be around here when the bulk of this thing is done, and a lot of us in this room won't be around here. We're doing this for our kids. We're doing this for our grandchildren. We're creating a stable Royal Oak for the future so that they have a place they could stay and be close to mom and dad or grandma and grandpa. But if we don't start making things a little easier for certain parts of our population to put their stakes and settle in Royal Oak, that's when you're going to start seeing the city change. So I'm railing on. It's the start of a process. We've got a lot of work to do on this, and we're going to be crossing paths quite a bit, and we're going to be talking, and there's always going to be bullies, and bullies are going to show up. Chuck, I point at you because you're a bully, but Jim Razor's a bully, and so we've got to deal with that. It's sometimes you've got to push. I know you well enough I can get away with that, but you've got to keep pushing at everybody to get the ideas out. And that's how we did it back in the 90s, but. We will get through this process. We'll end up with a good master plan, something that most people hopefully will like, some people won't, but it's going to define the future of our city. And for a lot of people in this room, that's not your future, because we'll still be working on this when many of us are gone. So think of going to bed at night and dreaming about what you want to see Royal Oak be in 30 years. And that's what we're doing. What's it going to be like in 30 years? I'm not going to be here, but someone will be. So let's leave them something good.
All right, Mr. Gantina.
So I just want to piggyback on Mr. Ellison's process comments for a second. While I may not necessarily agree with some of the comments that were made this evening, I certainly appreciate everyone that attended this evening and expressed their view, because quite frankly, that is the process, and that is how the process should unfold. None of these decisions have been made yet. I know seeing some of these images can be a little bit shocking, but no decisions have been made. What you're seeing are simply possibilities of what could happen. So the fact that you are out here tonight, I certainly appreciate it. I appreciate your opinions that you've expressed, and just want to make sure that that was acknowledged, because again, that is part of the process. You have to engage, you have to express your view in hopes that you can affect the change that you want to see. So.
All right, thank you. Any other commissioners who would like to speak, comment, or are we? Was that a hand there? Mm-hmm. Okay, Ms. Beakey.
I'd just like to echo, I appreciate everyone coming and staying through the meeting and making comments and participating, and I look forward to the refinements, and also I enjoy getting comments from people I see on the street, including teenagers and others that I interact with on a regular basis, because I'm curious what they think as well, and incorporating all of their futures in it, because again, we're working on something that's a future-facing document. Thank you.
All right. Other comments? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to suggest, well, wait, one other thing. Matt, you have any other comment?
Yeah, just one, and I think that hearing some of a lot of the subject of public comment, we did intend in this to be clear that we're not suggesting changes within existing neighborhoods. So that may be something that we can clarify in the language. And so I think I heard from some comments ways that may not have been exactly clear, like in the description of the future land use category. For instance, there is a difference between future land use and zoning, and we need to establish that, but we could probably be more clear as we make revisions prior to, in this round, that the intention is not to make land use changes within neighborhoods, but really looking at the major road corridors and other areas that have been discussed and identified. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, last call, or is there a motion? Commissioner Douglas.
I move we adjourn.
Second. Second by Mr. Gantina. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, nobody opposed. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.